This month's Patreon Q&A and Artisans of Steel podcast are a double header. We're stacking them today. I just finished the Q&A. That was good. We talked about trade shows, prep, and what to expect, and all kinds of stuff. If you're not part of the Patreon, you can go to patreon.com and look up my Mossy Fire Arts, or you can go to my Instagram where you can hit the link in my profile. That will take you, I believe, to my link tree where you can also find the Patreon very easily. You can sign up for as little as $5 and you become part of the community and part of the Discord. If you join at the $15 level, which is the illuminated individual, that's basically you get to be part of these Q&As as well as the live recordings of the Artisans of Steel podcast. And the great opportunity, especially for the Q&A, is that you get to be part of the conversation. You get me as your personal knife coach. And any questions you got, any things you're struggling through, let me help you troubleshoot. And so that's the value of the Q&A, and then also being part of the conversations and helping to drive the conversation for the Artisans of Steel podcast. And catching these conversations live. This is, it's Mert, our guest today, Mert Tansu, is here in this recording, but he's down in Australia, and it's like you don't get the opportunity to either meet these people or talk to them very frequently or very often at all unless you happen to see them in person. And so the value of these podcasts is that it lets you be part of the conversation, have Discord with these people, chat with them, and ask them whatever questions you might have of them that you otherwise wouldn't really honestly get a chance to do elsewhere. So, but before we get to Mert, I want to talk about our sponsors this month. This month we have Josh Weston. He's Josh A. Weston on Instagram. He's a very talented designer, creative crafter, and forger. He is also part of the Dragon Forge experience. I believe they just finished their winter season down in Texas at the Texas Renaissance Fair. And so I'm really psyched to see where he goes next, but I'm also excited to see what he does next because he's just such a creative and talented guy. Go give him a follow on Instagram at Josh A. Weston. Next is Mr. Michael Poor. He's Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. Another great guy. He's actually a local Washingtonian to me, local to me. And he is doing really great work. He does a lot of work around Japanese influence and Japanese inspired knives and forging tamahagane and making tantos and swords. He does make culinary knives as well. He's a great dude. So go give him a follow and check out his work over at Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. We have Russell Tinsley as well. Next, we have Russell Tinsley. His maker page is Can't Make Knives on Instagram, which is not true. He's been learning his stuff over the last couple of years especially, and taking classes at the New England School of Metalwork and working with fellow makers that are down in the Virginia area and doing some really cool stuff. And so I'm really thankful to have Russell as one of the super sponsors for the podcast. He's also on Instagram as Ouzel Finch Beers. He's the founder of Ouzel Finch Beers, and they do all kinds of crazy out of the box flavored and tasting super tasty beers, things that you never would have thought to put in beer. Like they had a lemon bar recently, and before that they were doing like a peanut butter beer, which I had, and I actually had multiples because I liked it so much. So go check them out. If you don't see them at your local beer market, talk to them about getting Ouzel Finch beers in, because they're very good beers. They're very tasty and very intriguing and interesting beers that you want to try. So go check it out and talk to your local beer market about getting them if they don't already carry them. Next up, we have Dan Hubbs. He is 6'6 Mountain Knives on Instagram and Facebook. He is a really talented dude. He's a good guy too. He actually just took my class on Damascus theory and Damascus making techniques, and he's already started putting some of those techniques to work in his own work using he made a mosaic Damascus pattern out of ball bearings and powdered steel, which is not necessarily the newest thing, but the way he put that material to use in a mosaic pattern is actually very unique and intriguing. And I really like the piece that he made out of it. It's a little EDC. You can check it out again on his Instagram page as well as Facebook at 66 Mountain Knives. Go give Dan Hubbs a follow. Next, we have Lawrence Lake. He is the owner of Maritime Knife Supply. He's also, by the way, his maker page is LGL Knives on Instagram. You can go find him. But on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, he is Maritime Knife Supply. You can also find him on the interwebs at maritimeknifesupply.com. He is a purveyor of basically anything you need knife making, based out of Atlantic, Canada. And he happily and very easily and readily ships across the United States as well. So don't hesitate to buy from him. He's got anything and everything you might possibly need. And if he doesn't have it, reach out to him. He can source it and he can get it to you. So go give Lawrence a follow at Maritime Knife Supply. Next, we have Mr. Gabe Fletcher of Anchorage Brewing, as well as his maker page, which is Anchorage Forge. A massive congratulations to him. He just won the Knife Talk / Blade, the Knife Talk and Damage Steel Build Along for 2023. That led up to the Damage Steel DCI show, which is the Damage Steel Culinary Invitation. I was like, what does DCI stand for? I couldn't remember for a second. But anyways, he won it with a beautiful blade that he forged out of the Damage Steel, which is a very unusual approach. Most people stock remove the Damage Steel, but it was cool to see there were actually a few forged Damage Steel blades at the show this year, including Gabe's, and he won the build along, and I just want to give him my congratulations. He also just finished up a beautiful hunter. You should go check out on his Instagram. His finish on the thing is pretty damn impeccable. It's hard to find any issues with it really at all. He's a maker. He hasn't been making knives for very long, but he's already doing some really great work, and he's going to be one to follow for sure. Last but not least, we have Eric Kidwell of at District 202 LLC. He is a maker and creative person based out of Arizona, and I look forward actually to seeing him in, what is it? I think it's early March, the second weekend in March. The Travis Wirtz Hammer In is happening, and I'm going to be down there demonstrating, and then I'm going to be following that up actually with some classes in Tucson. But I'm excited to see Eric. Eric is always the point man when it comes to those demos and those hammer-ins, because he's running around strapped up with all these cables and batteries and cameras and sound equipment, because he's chasing around the makers as they do the demonstrations, especially the grinding demonstrations, where, you know, a person is standing right in front of the grinder. That's really hard to see what's actually happening. And what he is filming is projected up onto a flat screen TV that people can watch and see some of that detailed work as well, as, you know, seeing them do the other portions of the presentation. He is the go-to guy for that. And I look forward to seeing him soon. And without further ado, we're going to move into our regular scheduled programming of the Artisans of Steel podcast. I met Mert. God, I don't even actually remember when I first met Mert. I think I first became aware of your work actually over on the kitchen knife forums, before really social media, especially Instagram, was even a thing. There were the forums where people were spending a lot of time talking about knives and sharing their work. And for culinary knife makers, kitchen knife forums was the place to do that. And that's where I first saw your stuff, and I really liked it. And I think the first time I met you was at Blade Show in maybe 2018, I believe.
18, yep.
Yeah. And it's been love ever since then, honestly. No, love and admiration for sure. No, you've been doing some really great work. I think what's really cool about what you do and your approach to knife making is that you come to knife making from a professional background in cooking and being a professional chef at a high level. And I feel like there are very few, if hardly any, and you would probably know better than me, that have come to culinary knife making and are doing a good job in culinary knife making at a high level, who came from cooking and chefing. And so I'm really excited to get into kind of your perspective and approach to your knife making based off of that experience that you have, as well as other portions of the conversation. But really, I just want to say thank you for joining the podcast today, and I'm really excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Likewise.
I want to kick it off with just kind of getting a little bit of your background and your history and where you come from, and because you don't, even though you're here, you're joining us from Australia, you're not from Australia.
No, I'm
Oh.
not.
And
I got a sensor on the light. If I don't move, it's
don't
gonna
worry.
time out, and I'm gonna be in the dark, and you'll be seeing this little red screen in the background.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah, where are you from? How did you like? What were early years like? Because like I said, you started with culinary. Has culinary always been a part of your life since you were a young kid, or
Well,
what were your
culinary
parents
was the
doing?
second part. So I'm born
Okay.
in 1981, Turkey. Born in Ankara, the capital, and then we relocated to Antalya near the Mediterranean Sea, and we lived in a quite touristy town, Antalya. And back when I was growing, when I was a kid, so because we lived in the touristic places, and you'll see those touristic shops, they had those replica swords,
Oh, sure.
and yeah, all those like shitty, like mild steel, the crappy reimagination of the real thing,
Sure.
and all the kids want to have a bicycle. Like at the end of the year, they try and bring good grades so they can get a bike. My goal was a sword. I said, Dad, I want
Oh,
a
wow.
sword. If you guys, yeah, like all the normal kids want a bike or something, right? I'm like, no, I want a sword. And the parents are like freaking out. No, we can't get you a sword. You and your brother, you guys will kill each other. It's just a blunt shit. It's like it's not even a real sword, but it's a sword.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know, maybe third grade or fourth grade or something, and I couldn't get them to buy it because they deemed it was
Yeah.
too dangerous. And after a year of me nagging and bothering them, they gave me my first real. Before owning a knife, I owned the replica sword. That was my
Oh,
thing.
wow.
Yeah, I play with it. I cherished it. I've never chopped trees with it because I knew like it wasn't sharp. But
It wasn't made for
my
that.
yeah, my first thing was actually before culinary. It was sword. Like I was into swords when I was a kid,
Wow.
loved it,
Okay.
and then I don't know what happened, but I think as a progression of it, all boys or all kids, I started getting more into cars, and I started getting more into the
Okay.
airplanes and aircrafts and things like that. And yeah, I found some new toy, and I wasn't interested in swords because back then no internet, getting information and stuff like that was difficult. And then next thing was before becoming a chef, actually I was a basketball player.
Oh, right. I forgot that you did
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Professional.
So yeah,
So
and
were you
I
on like
was
an Olympic team, or are you?
no, I was no. I was playing in the second league.
Okay.
I was in the top league. I was right when I was in the uni, like my first year of the uni. That was a I think then I had to make my mind up because people who are going to be
Mm.
players, they were practicing twice a day, and I was going to uni, and my body already started breaking down, and I realized, man, this is a lot of work, and if I do my best, I might be a bench player.
Oh, wow.
I might not like because you starting out like maybe a million kids in my age start up, and 10,000 of them get licensed to play basketball in like the junior levels, and out of them, 200 of them play in the under 18. Out of the 200, 20 of them are going to be playing in the leagues, and out of that 20, maybe one or two will make the national team. I
Right.
realized I wasn't going to be that kid, and
Mm.
so I was looking for some kind of career change, and I was always into food. I always had a really strong taste memory.
Oh,
It's a
cool.
yeah, it's a blessing and also a curse, but it'll be like this, and we'll be eating something, and mom will make something, and I'll tell her, this is 16. Like imagine your 16-year-old kid saying that, Mom, use a different kind of rice. This rice is shorter and a bit sticky and it's a bit under inside, and mom couldn't figure out like asshole. I cooked for you. You're welcome. You know.
That's cool.
And I was in hospitality management, and I thought like, man, a lot of people in hospitality management, they want to go work for like the front desk or something.
Yeah.
And it was time to do my we had to do like a 6 month kind of not an internship, but get to go to like a place and work there 6 months.
Okay.
And I'm thinking like, man, everybody wants to be in the office. Everybody's saying, I want to work in a comfortable office. I want to be like work in the sales department. And like, I want to be a chef. And people
Hmm.
gave me the side look because this is like, this is le- uh, this is late night, early 2000s. Then
It
being a
was
chef,
before being a chef was a thing.
yeah,
It's like it's
because
you went and cooked in restaurants because you couldn't do anything else.
you became a chef because that's the only thing that you hang up. That was it. Like you being chef wasn't cool. Like maybe Food Network might be out then back then, but like especially in Turkey, if you were a chef, you had to come from a single town. So you had to come from a single city. Because that was like the if you're a chef, you come from that city. That's the city of the chefs. And you're saying like I'm from a
Oh,
different city. Like people didn't even compute with it because it wasn't a thing. And all my friends looked at me like you're crazy. You're gonna be in the chefs. Like all none of the kitchens are fit for you because I'm 6'4". I'm a big guy, and all the benches are like made for
yeah,
five
you're
ten
down at
people.
your
Like yeah,
knees.
yeah, down on my knees. And I said I want to be a chef, and that's how it started, man. And I finished uni, and I was thinking I want to get more. I want to learn more, but I'm not at the age I can't just like go take a uni again because I already finished the uni.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be starting somewhere as a kitchen hand or dishwasher to go up the steps to be a chef. Like that doesn't make sense. And at the time, there was there was a program, and this program was like you'll be working in US for a year or a year and a half to work whatever department of the hotel you wanted. And a friend of mine, she said, "Oh, I found this program. I'm going to be going to Georgia. I'll be working like 1.5 years." And I'm like, "Where'd you find this?" Like, this is the place. And I just reached out to them. I said, "If you guys can get me the kitchen, I'm doing it." Like, yeah. And next thing is like in a month later, I had my tickets to go to work for Chateau Lan in Georgia.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And came to US, and it was a bit of a culture shock and a bit, but because I
Sure.
lived in a big city and I was all of a sudden living in a remote, like not remote, but it was far. It was a country town. You were living in a small country, like working in a
I
country
see.
town, but yeah, that's how I got into cooking.
Wow. And what did your parents do when you were growing up?
My mom was she worked for the like sort of like a federal bank, reserve bank.
Okay.
Yeah, she was in management. She wasn't working the bank. She was like management of one of the reserve bank. My
Sure.
dad was a lawyer.
Okay.
My dad was a lawyer, yeah. And again, for them, it's a surprise. I mean, they were always supportive,
Yeah.
but the society is wired differently. Like everybody wants to brag about what school their kids finished. And
Right.
my son finished this uni and doing an MBA in this place, and then he's gonna start working at this law firm, or he's gonna. And
Right.
what's your son do? Like, yeah, mine finished university, and he wants to be a chef. And in early 2000s, like that was like "Ugh," that didn't look like the best career choice,
It's
but they
like
were
you're
supporting.
shaming your parents.
Yeah,
Were they
man, like
embarrassed or were they supportive
no,
of you?
no, they were supportive, but
That's good.
it's the society's norms.
Right.
Like, and my parents were white collar workers, and growing up in 90s, late 80s or early 90s, if your kids were not successful in school, you will threaten them saying, if you're not going to do this, might as well get you to like a sign up as an apprentice to industry, or like you'll be
Sure.
working the lathe. And but I finished university and I brought all the industry back to my home. So I got like lathes and grinders and
Yeah.
all the industrial shit back home.
And what did you go to school for when you went to university? What were you going to school for?
Hospitality management.
Hospitality management, right? Okay.
Hospitality management. And a lot of people from my classes, and they end up becoming like a GM of the hotels and all that. But yeah, I decided I want to be a chef.
And
It was fun.
well, and you said you always enjoyed food and you're like a super taster and you have these taste
Yeah,
memory qualities. And did so then growing up, did you help with the cooking a lot? Were you in the kitchen a lot? How like
yeah.
where did that love for that come from?
Look, it's because I grew up with the real food. It's like I've seen my grandmother make stuff from scratch, like cook stuff on open fire, and
Oh wow.
I've I've seen it was a pickle time. Like they pickled cucumbers, or it was time to make tomato paste. It was
Yeah.
the end of the like it was the fall time, and we had all these tomatoes that had to be turned into. Like we lived in the my granddad was a builder, and he built this four-story building, and all of my aunts were living in there, including my grandma. And
Wow.
I seen like those ladies got together to dry vegetables, pickle vegetables, make paste, make things. And I grew up with the watching food that it was growing right there, or we just bought it from the market in front of us, then turned into something else. That transition was so fascinating, man. To
Yeah.
see like there'll be something on the tree, and next like couple weeks, whatever it was on the tree will grow, and either way you'll eat it or you'll turn it to something else like that. That transition was magic.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I feel like people don't have that close of a connection, especially to the
Yeah,
food, not only to the things they have in their life, but the food even that they are putting in their bodies. And I can't, I didn't even honestly have that kind of connection. And so I can't imagine what it was like to have to grow up like that, to and to see kind of the magic of that, because obviously it's very easy to screw up food as well.
yeah,
But to see the care that somebody would put into to handling those products and different fruits and vegetables and material and create something meaningful and interesting and delicious and care enough to share it with you. And so I see how that had a really like had a grasp on you or really kind of
yeah.
stuck with you throughout your life to that point.
You start to appreciate it more. Like I've seen roosters head chopped in front of me, then turned into a dinner. I've seen
Right.
I've seen like sheep that came in that we played for the whole weekend that turned to like a ground meat for a bit. And,
Right.
you know, I've seen it. Like it for a kid, it's hard to handle. But then if you can't overcome that gory side of it or the dirty side of it initially, well,
This is
hell,
gonna be a fun
yeah,
game.
it's gonna be fun. YMCA.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you start to appreciate. Like I know that food doesn't come in a package. I've
Right.
seen where food comes from, and I have a respect for it. Like I would not, and then you learn to utilize every part of it. Then you turn to like different techniques to preserve food or to prepare food, rather than
Yeah.
I don't feel like eating this. I'm just gonna throw this away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just like processing and just like as you're talking, I'm seeing you having like that experience of seeing the animals butchered and just like yeah the appreciation the greater appreciation for where the food is coming from, because I think because we've lost that connection for the most
Yes.
part. There are obviously still people in the world that are very close to and
Mhm.
connected to their food like that, but for the most part in westernized societies we do not have that connection.
Yeah.
And and because of that, we let a lot of shit get into the food that doesn't need to be there, shouldn't be there
Yeah.
for it to actually be nutritious. We should be eating seasonally because that's where the greatest nutrition from the food comes from, because the more preservatives and things you start putting on stuff, that's just extra shit you're putting in yourself that's completely unnecessary. And yeah, I think it's really important to have the connection and with your food, and that honestly, like, that stems into craft work, I feel like, as well.
Yeah.
We're so disconnected from how things are made because we just push a button on the computer and then it shows up at your door. You
Shows
don't
up. Yeah.
realize, like, from as a hand maker of things, um people really struggle with, and that's kind of what we talked about a little bit in my Q&A that I did before this, is people struggling with the understanding, and it's really just like a lack of connection, that the reason something costs a lot of money is because an individual standing right in front of you just spent, several days or even a couple weeks working to create a thing to potentially sell to you. And then when you see the price tag, or when people see the price tag, they're just like, "Oh my God, that's so expensive." It's
It
like,
is.
I just spent the last 2 weeks of my life building this and putting this together, putting my heart and soul and my care and thought and experience into creating this thing. and because it's, you know, not $59.59.95 on the shelf at a fucking store,
How
you get
dare
upset.
you? How dare you, Marco? Fucking how dare you?
I see. What are you drinking there?
I am Turkish tea, man. This is a habit. This is a
Is that
I'm
a good
addicted to
habit
it.
or a bad habit? The way you
It's a
said
good
that, it's
habit.
almost
Look,
like it's a bad thing.
no, I drink a lot, but it's a culture. Like when you go to Turkey, like you'll see everybody will. You go to a restaurant after the meal, this will come. Like you wouldn't have to ask, and like so it's funny. My wife, she's American, and we've been to Turkey so many times, and she tells like I don't want it, just one, and the server looks at them funny, and then the busboy will come with the 2 cups, and we'll send them back, and the server will yell at the busboy like, "Why'd you take it back?" Like, it's a thing. And I start my day with the tea, Turkish tea, and I train my kitchen stuff so nicely. Like, I will come into the kitchen, and my water will be hot, and I will tell them good morning. I'll just pour the hot water in the tea to like the loose leaves to start brewing it. By the time I put my gear and knives and everything, I'll come back. My tea will be ready. The kids' kitchen will be like, make sure the chef's tea is hot. Make sure there's a hot water because I need to have my tea. Like people need their caffeine in the morning.
Right.
I take my caffeine in the form of tea.
Interesting. Yeah. Hopefully someday I would love to go to Turkey. There's so much history there. It's
Yeah,
super intriguing. And you've been
and
doing
this is
some
the
historical recreation work yourself, which I'm
yes,
excited
I
to get
have.
into. But
Yeah,
okay, so you got into culinary. You were doing culinary for a long time. Is that how you met your wife?
yes. She was working in a restaurant as a server, and I was a chef, and we
Okay.
met, and we ended up getting married. Our wedding was in Turkey, so it was nice and big event and all that. And it was so different for me because for my wife as well because we just told them we want to get married in Turkey, and they did everything for us from the arrangements of the everything was ready. So we
Wow.
literally ordered, yeah, they did everything for us, and even the my wife's
Wait,
wedding
sorry. Who
dress.
was that again that did everything?
My parents did everything.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Yeah,
They were so excited for you to get married
bro,
and to do it there
we
in
we,
Turkey.
we walked into wedding, like we literally walked into wedding. Everything was ready,
Holy shit. That is not what my wedding was like. We did a
and
lot of work to get that wedding put together. My
and
wife especially.
my wife was freaking out like I don't have a wedding dress. I'm like, honey, we get it made in Turkey. She's like, what do you mean? Like we have only like we're gonna be there like 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, it's plenty. So it's funny. We went to the this seamstress, this tailor. She's doing it all like wedding dress. That's her specialty. And Danny, my wife Danny, she brought a picture saying like, I want something like this. And the woman took some measurements and all that. And she said, come 2 days later. And this is 2 days prior to wedding. So we
Okay.
got there. She had exactly what she imagined on the paper, and she made it. Danny tried it. She loved it. Then she's thinking like, oh, the picture I showed had like 4 stripes something, but this is only 3. And she said that to me. I said, it's fine. I know exactly what you're saying. It's 2 days to wedding. And the woman was like, what is happening? What's she saying? I'm like, no, she's just saying like there was 4 stripes in the one, like there was 4 folds on the thing, but this has 3. And she looks at the pictures like, she just rips the dress on top of her. And then he's like, no, 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 leave it. It's okay. Leave it. I'll be fine with it. And she's like, oh, I made a mistake. And we show up 2 days later. It's exactly how she wanted with the 4 freaking
Wow.
stripes. And yeah, like we literally walked into the wedding. It was great.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And that seems like that must be a very cultural thing where the parents are so proud and excited and the community around you guys that they're able to
Yeah,
pull it together and make it
yeah.
happen with very little energy from the couple.
Zero energy. Zero.
That's so crazy to
Nothing.
think that like they're you guys were so loved and the community was so supportive that they wanted to celebrate you and they did
Exactly.
all this work to wow.
Yeah.
That is cool. That's very cool. So you guys get married and you continue chefing.
Yeah.
How do you end up in Australia? That's what how does a man from Turkey end up in Australia?
Yeah. It's funny, man, because the hotel we worked at, Chateau Land, they had another property they opened a property in California. And well, what they've done is they sent few people from the team just to get the place up and running, like to trying to implicate the same standards and all that.
Hmm.
Then they've done another one at the golf course. want to say St. Andrews, no, Kent, oldest golf club in Scotland apparently, where late Dr. Panos was from, I think. No, he was Irish, but anyway, so they send a team. The team opens the place up, and at the time, and we were thinking, looking at our documentaries, like we are watching late Anthony Bourdain, like all this
Mm,
stuff, and showing like stuff about Australia, New Zealand, man. It's such a cool place. It'll be cool. It'll be nice to just go there, spend time there, and then the rumors started saying Dr. Panos was going to open a place in Australia, and we're like, yeah, sign us up. How
right.
do we do it? And the process took a year to get the. So by the time we heard the rumor, and by the time it was reality, and we applied, there was like almost 2 years, and within the 2 years, I changed jobs. I started working for a different place, and all that. But yeah, then next thing we know is like we got the visa, and they gave us a visa for 2 years. No, they gave us a visa for 4 years, and we're like, 4 years? We just want to be like 1 year adventure. Will come back. And so we got to Australia, and so the hotel was reopening, and there was a golf course. They opened the golf course like years ago, and just put accommodation, and we're trying to get the place up and running. And then we start noticing differences of Australia versus US,
Okay.
because when you look at US, like I was used to working in US, and I'm thinking Australia is just going to be like US. Only difference is you're going to be driving on the other side of the road. There's going to be sharks, and there's going to be some bugs and shit. Everybody's trying to kill you. I thought that was the difference, but
Okay.
it couldn't be far from it, because when I was working in the US, I was working as a manager, as an exec chef. I was working 70 hours. My previous job, I was working 60 hours, and that was normal.
Yeah.
And we worked, like especially in hospitality, you worked, and there was no such thing as overtime. If you work as a hourly people got paid, but if you're a manager, that was your salary, and you worked. And for example, my wife was on the salary as well as a manager, and it'll be Sunday, and there'll be a bunch of checkouts, and the GM will just call her to come help with the checkouts. Like, you worked 6 days, you
Yeah.
worked 5.5 days, and you worked, and we thought like that was normal. And we got to Australia, and they're like, oh yeah, your contract is to work for 38 hours. We're like, yeah, yeah, 38 hours. I know what you guys gonna do. And no, it was 40 hours. Like we were expected to work 40 hours, 42. After 42 hours, the GMs or our bosses were telling us, you guys need to back down on your hours. Like, you work too much, or like take an extra day off. And we're like, what do you mean take an extra day off? What do you mean I have to only work 8 hours? Then we came to the realization there's such a bit diff stark difference between the lifestyle in US and Australia, because in US you worked, and that's all you did. And after a year, you had like a 5 days of vacation time. In Australia, you realize there was such a good balance, such a good work and life balance.
Right.
And like, I was chefing in the US, I was collecting knives, but in US, I would have never thought that I would have a time to make knives. In
Sure.
Australia, I was collecting knives, but because I had so much spare time, like we had 4 weeks paid vacation, then I was thinking, I started picking hobbies. Knife making was a hobby, but for a chef to pick a hobby in US, that's so difficult, man. So
Right.
difficult. You have to have the gear, or you have to have some kind of assistance to begin with. But yeah, then as I said, I had plenty of time, and I was collecting custom knives back then. And
Hmm.
I bought like I bought a lot of Japanese knives, Japanese handmade knives. I wanted to get Japanese custom knives, couldn't get it done because they don't make that stuff for you. I'm like, okay, I got the custom knife. I wasn't happy with the custom knife, and then I found myself trying to explain this custom maker how a knife should perform, how I should do it, and I realized this guy makes a knife, but he doesn't know how to use it properly. So I'm just wasting my time, and that's how it started, man. And I found this dirty old gentleman named Keith Flutter, Uncle Keith. I found him. He was 4 hours away from me, and I booked the class with him, and I think it was like December. It's coming to a 10 or 11th year of me visiting him.
Oh
I
wow.
brought
Okay.
few of the custom knives I had
Yeah.
with me, and I brought some of the Japanese knives, and I said to myself, I'll go do a class, I'll learn how to make knives, and then I'll make myself few knives. and I'll be done. That
Right.
was the thought 11 years ago.
That was the thought. Yeah.
I said,
Keith.
this will be cheaper. Trust me. Instead of ordering custom knives, I'll do a class. I'll get few tools, few, just little,
Just a
just little
couple of them.
tools, and
Yep.
couple of them, and that'll be it.
That's hilarious. You got sucked in.
Oh,
Keith
something
Flutter.
is yes.
Yeah. Keith
Big
Flutter is
shout
a
out to Uncle Keith.
Uncle Keith. Yeah, he's a great guy. I feel bad. The first time I met Keith, actually, I think that same year I met you and Corin and Kev. I I think I was in the pit late and I was, all the Aussies, they have a quick wit and sharp tongues and and Keith said something and I wasn't mad at him. I was fucking with him, but I jumped on his back and not taking into consideration that he's like fucking 70 years old or something like that.
This thing.
And he's that big. And yeah, he's a small guy. He's a small Aussie. And he was a good sport. But I was like, now every time I see him, I'm like, don't worry, I'll stay over here. I'm not gonna jump on you. But yeah, he's a great guy. And he's doing great work. If people don't know who
Yeah,
Keith Flutter is, go check him out. He's
yeah. Journeyman Smith, and he just finished a nice wakizashi. He had it on his
nice.
Instagram page, and had like a nice quilted maple saya and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice work, nice build. I'll probably see him this weekend. I'm going to Canberra Knife Show on Sunday. I hope to see him there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was coming up. So so that wasn't it's interesting. There are a lot of makers that in about 2012, which is when you first took the lesson with Keith, or around that time, who started around that time, like you, myself, Don Wynn. There are others that I can't think of right now, but makers here. I think maybe actually Jeff Fader as well. I can't remember if he was that far back. But 2012 was like kind of a funky year for a bunch of now very many established and very talented makers, especially in the culinary realm, to be making knives. And so how long, so that was roughly 2012. How long were you doing both the chefing and the knife making? And actually, let me back up. I got a picture here. Can you tell me about this picture?
Oh shit.
I pulled this picture of Mert from his Facebook page with the French toque and the chef whites.
Okay, guys, that's really me. Okay. When I quit basketball, I was 95 kilos or something. So I added another half of that weight onto my body. Being chefing is a stressful job, and you eat. You don't eat because you're hungry, but you eat out of stress.
Sure.
And that's what happened. So I quit basketball, and my metabolism slowed down, and I was eating like as if I was a professional athlete, and I was not.
I gotcha.
And yeah, that looks. Turn that shit off, man. That's too skinny.
And then I got some pictures of some of the plating setups that you've done. I don't know what's going on this. It looks tasty, whatever it is.
That was a tuna carpaccio I did. I had a sea urchin foam to go on that later with radishes, and that was one of the. I think this is 2011.
Okay.
Or 2012 latest.
Just before you caught the sickness. Is another one. Is that octopus?
That's octopus, and this is actually from my house. I was just doing like research and development at home.
Okay.
Just for shits and giggles, yeah.
Well, it looks fucking delicious, is what it looks like.
It was good. It was good. It was good research and development.
Nice. So oh geez, I just punched the microphone. You start making knives and you think you're just going to do it a little bit. And where or what was it that made you decide you wanted to do it more and more? Obviously, you had more time now that you were working in Australia to be able to have kind of a side hustle. And so did you start selling knives to people, or how did that develop from working with Keith to you becoming a knife maker?
So I made knife with Keith, and on my way back, I'm driving, and I'm feeling dirty. I'm feeling like, man, I'm feeling like I'm cheating. I'm cheating on hospitality. I'm cheating on chefing.
Oh,
Because,
wow.
yeah, look, as a chef, I did not suck. Okay. When I
Sure.
was chefing, when I was chefing, the restaurant I worked, the restaurant I ran, won a chef set. Winning a chef set in Australia is like getting a Michelin star.
Okay.
So I did not suck, but I knew my heart was like, I was hooked.
Oh, wow.
4 hours back,
You were
yeah,
in love.
man, I was in love. I was like, this was like, man, I'm driving 4 hours. All I'm thinking is, he had this in the shop. I can get this here, and I can do this. And, yeah. 4 hours, bro, on the way. I'm just thinking, and
Yeah.
then I'm buying stuff. Like I'm having like off days, Monday, Tuesday, or something. I'm in the
Sure.
shed. We had a tiny garden shed, and it's like 4 feet to 6 feet. That was the garden shed. I had a one
Okay.
2 by 36 grinder,
Okay.
and I was using the trash cans, like those massive trash cans, as my workbench. I was putting
Oh,
stuff
sure.
on top. Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
had a, sh- I had a shitty like 10-pound anvil or something. That was my setup, man. I was, but when you're first making knives, everybody tells you, like all the experienced makers will tell you. I'm sure you can attest as well. Saying you can make knife with no power tools in 10 hours. Yeah, if you're really experienced, yes, you can. But when you're first starting, it
Yeah.
takes you like 30, 40 hours for like something crappy because you don't know what you're doing wrong. You're
Right.
not good at it. And to be able to good at something, you have to spend 2,000 hours minimum.
Right.
And I had to get my 2,000 hours in. And
Yeah.
I just made knives. Like first, I made a knife. I'm like, yeah, it looks great. Yeah, 40 hours. It took me 40 hours to make it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure like it wasn't as good as the ones I'm making right now, but back then it felt awesome.
Sure.
And I started making knives as a hobby. Like I gave them away, or I used them, kept them, and
Hmm.
then what happened was I made a knife for myself, and somebody from the forums, or somebody I was talking to, wanted to buy it. I'm like, what?
Oh,
You
really?
want to buy it? I'm like, yeah. And
Do you remember who it was?
Rami Rami Malek. No, not
Okay.
Malek, sorry. Rami Messiah. Rami Malek is the actor guy.
The
Rami
actor. I
Messiah.
was like, whoa, Rami Malek. All right.
No, Rami Messiah, I think he is,
Okay.
yeah, based in Sydney. And
Okay.
that was one of the first knives. And the second knife I made was a really nice one with the came. I made a saya as well. Went to one of the collectors and kitchen knife forums, which later I met in person. He went to Chef Large.
Oh,
Chef
yeah.
Large is a screen name, and
Yep.
I met him in person a couple years later, and it was great. Yeah, that's how it started. And I started taking a few orders here and there, and back then, what I was doing was like if an average knife of a Japanese knife was like $300, I'm like, yeah, $300 will do it. But I wasn't taking into account that it takes me 40 hours to make it. And I'm using like a $40 of timber. I'm using like
Right.
a $30 of. And I'm like, yeah, $300. I'm winning, yes. And I start getting longer of a list, longer of a wait list, longer of a wait list. I'm like, yeah,
That's not too bad.
I'll
That's
make
only
them
that's $7.50 an hour for
40
three
hours. Well,
for 40.
by the time you
Yeah.
take the steel and all that, like you're making yourself like
Yeah, maybe
sweatshop
making a
rates.
dollar an hour.
Yeah, you're making yourself sweatshop rates. And I had like few orders picked up, and I was spending too much time on them, but I was using them, and I'm like, yeah, this cuts it. And the
Right.
best thing about kitchen knives, I tell a lot of the like EDC makers or guys who make bowies and things like that. Best thing about kitchen knife is you get to try it. Okay,
Sure.
with the bowie knives, like you may run out of zombies, but I never run out of onions and potatoes and carrots to cut.
Right.
And best thing is cut it, try it. If it doesn't do it, see where it's thick. Sometimes see where it's thin. It might be you might be too flat or you might be too flexible. Just go back to drawing board, go back to cutting board. Try,
Yeah.
cut. That's the best thing about kitchen knives, and you, they give you so much feedback if you know what you're doing. Like you might take a knife. Well, this was the first knife I bought, custom knife. First
Yeah.
custom knife I bought. It was a beautiful pattern welded steel, beautiful handles and scales and everything. Yeah, it looks good. I looked it up. The heel and tip were same thickness because there was zero distal taper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because when I tried to cut onion, I said the same thing. Oh, okay. I was trying to cut the tip of the onion. Using the tip, I'm trying to cut the onion, and onion is turning into like the blooming onion of Outback. Like it's
Right. Yeah,
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 it's
yeah.
opening it up and it's
Right.
not yet. Okay.
Jeez. But real quick, side note, when you are testing your knives,
Yeah.
so I feel like a lot of makers, unfortunately, and myself included, have wasted a lot of food. Do you have any if you're testing on onions and carrots and potatoes, like do you just turn that into a soup or something? Or how does that stuff get thrown away, or do you try to use the vegetables that you, well, especially maybe you don't do it as much anymore, but when you are doing any kind of testing, what do you have something that you try to intentionally
This
cut?
this is what I recommend for new
Okay.
makers, or if they're trying to get into cooking knives and they don't want to waste a lot of produce, which I would appreciate. Okay, peel your potatoes. Okay, you want to make sure your potatoes are peeled because a lot of times the grit, if there's grit in them, okay, you might get in the food or you might chip your knives and nobody
Oh,
wants
right.
to eat mud. Okay, take peeled potatoes, take the potatoes, wash them, peel them. Okay, set yourself a pot with half covered in water
Okay.
and try cutting potatoes. Cut them different ways, this way, that way, lengthwise, julienne, brunoise, okay, baton. Add them in the water and turn into a mashed potato. If you want to get better at your cuts, or if you want to test a knife, go make yourself a chicken noodle soup. Because when you make a chicken noodle soup, you have to prepare very finely cut, like almost like not brunoise, but you need like to do fine mirepoix. You have to do onion, celery, carrot.
Right.
So no, you shouldn't be wasting any food. So make sure, even with the sweet potatoes or carrots, peel them, okay, then cut them. Or you might want to say, okay, I want to try how knife performs with the carrots. Try the julienne carrots. And don't just like take a carrot and cut the end of it. And like, yeah, if you're trying to cut minimal increments at a time, knife is going to feel great. Cut it right in the middle, see what it does.
Right.
Then try to cut it julienne. But yeah, if you if you can think ahead, you shouldn't be wasting any food.
So
For the
try to
for
have a simple recipe
simple
maybe in
recipe,
mind.
try and have a plan. Worst case scenario, make a puree out of it, especially people who have
Sure.
kids, like young kids. Make a
Oh
puree
yeah.
out of it, or make a stock, make broths. Like I'll do chicken broth twice a week in my house because I do a lot of roasted chicken, and
Sure.
I also veggie garden as well. Like I'll do compost, I'll
Oh,
do
nice.
if like carrot scraps, onion scraps. They'll all go to my broth, they'll go to my stock, and
Yeah.
so technically you shouldn't be wasting anything
Yeah,
because you
especially
should
if
be
you're
thinking
making
ahead
your
of
own
time.
stocks. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's perfect for a veggie stock. Um, and I could see even if you didn't want to use it for a stock or for a soup, you could puree it and then throw it in with like tomato sauce and make pasta with tomato sauce and marinara or some sort.
Let's say you cut a lot of carrots, your cuts are crappy, they're all over the shop. Yeah, great. Puree them, add them into your base for your when you make a bolognese, when you make it like a meat
Oh yeah.
sauce. Like if you got fussy kids, they don't want to eat veggies, slide them in. They won't
Hide
notice.
it. Yeah, hide it. That's my mom growing up. Apparently, my mom used to hide broccoli in the spaghetti sauce. She would do exactly that. She'd puree it. She'd steam
Yeah,
it, puree it, and then slide it on in. And I had no
no
idea.
idea. See?
Yeah, that's good. We got a question actually from one of our Patreon peeps. Um, this one's from Michael Poor. He's Red Dragon Forge. He
Yeah,
says, how does he keep his head so shiny? And
fucking
who
hate you,
does he
Mike.
have in the Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards fight?
Okay, Mike, we talked to Mike quite a bit, and we're both MMA fans. And thanks for picking on my bald head, Mike. And I
I'm
use
not far behind. I'm hiding it, but it's happening up there. I'm losing it.
it's the lighting in Australia. It's the lighting in Australia makes you look more bold. Okay.
It makes you
If
look
you
balder. That's fair. Goddamn son.
yeah, yeah, that's the sun. When it comes to Colby and Leon, I think I'm gonna go with Leon, but I wouldn't be surprised if Colby takes him to the ground and smothers him.
I got you. Okay, so he does have a serious question to follow those. He
Okay.
says, more seriously now, how does he balance his desire with making high-end Japanese style culinary knives, custom production culinary knives, and personal projects like the Wootz Kilige?
Kılıç. Kılıç.
Kilich. Okay, which is a sword. So how do
Yes.
you find the balance between custom stuff and production stuff and kind of fun projects? Probably was the
So
color.
to
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
give you a better answer to that, let me
Okay.
just like peel a couple layers back to give you more. It'll be better explanation. So I said I was playing basketball. Okay, I'm a
Yep.
basketball player, and one of the reasons I quit was, along with my body falling apart, was I love playing basketball. I
Okay.
love to see the ball go through the hoop. But when that became a job, start feeling different. When you
Okay.
miss a shot, that was like, oh man, I was so close. That became poor performance.
Yeah.
It killed the job out of it. It killed the joy out of it really fast.
Yeah.
And okay, it's time for dance of the day.
Turn the light back on.
And I start making knives. Although making knives is a fun job, I had to find something that had nothing to do with making knives. That's how the making
Okay.
swords or making clutch was born, because it's a bad business decision. It takes you, I don't know, 40 hours, 50 hours, but because you've been doing the same thing so over and over, and you need to have some kind of project.
Yeah.
So your project, your own project. I think Delbert Ely was saying it, like he was spending like a half a day out of week just for himself to do
Sure.
something. If you do that, I think that will keep the creative juices flow,
Yeah.
and you'll get a more satisfaction rather than going in, look at the board, what do you have to prepare for today.
Yeah.
As fun as it sounds, guys, after doing this for a while, making knives, and especially if you're working custom knives, this
Yeah.
turns into a job, and you start dreading it. You start dreading doing that steel that you liked it back then, but now all of a sudden you're making different steel. You don't like doing it,
Right.
or you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
You
100%.
need to have projects like yesterday I made snake razor. I tried play with it
Sure.
because I had to have something. I realized I don't have enough time to be able to make myself forge myself a something, or I need to make something. This is me time. I need some me time. You
Yeah.
have to have me time in the shed. And with the high end stuff and coach and all that, another reason I start having another second line is I was I couldn't afford chef knives. I couldn't afford the high end custom chef knives, and I'm thinking like, man, I can't spend this much on a knife. I wish they were a bit more affordable. Then I start making kitchen knives, and they were affordable. With
Right.
me having a couple of years of wait list, and then I'm like, shit, I can't do this, and I have to raise my price up. Then I start using more material, and I realize, oh shit, I became the guy who's making expensive kitchen knives that I couldn't afford myself.
Like me. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I want to have a Japanese style knife brand that is separate than Tansu knives. So with the Tansu, I've been doing mostly Western style, my own flair into it, rather than if it's Japanese style with the forge finish and simple, I'm trying to keep it under Hunter Valley blades, because Hunter Valley blades is what somebody needs. Tansu knife is most likely what people want to have.
I see. So it's the utilitarian tool
Yeah.
versus the kind of the extra aesthetic
Yes.
and yeah. I like that.
Plus, look, Marco, you can say like one of them is forge finish, simple handle. If you look
Right.
at the other one, like the other one has a sometimes walrus ivory handle, my own crucible steel, and things like that. Like they don't flow within the same brand, if that makes sense. Like one of them looks like
Right.
very distinct, separate design, separate. You won't
I,
expect to see the same lineup.
no, it's good. It's smart. And I think it's good to diversify yourself in that way because it does, there's some kind of pat on your own back kind of cool. I sold a knife for several $1,000s, but at the same time, it's it it doesn't check off all the boxes. And coming from a place for me personally where like I grew up with very little money and I still sometimes am struggling with money here and there. And it's like and the reality that you were just talking about, like making knives that you couldn't even afford yourself. So how do I translate my work into something that can still get into people's hands, that is
Yep.
a high quality tool, but doesn't necessarily cost as much and doesn't require as much from me. I think that's a great solution, is to have kind of this rougher, more utilitarian style knife. It's still a great tool, but it's available at a more accessible price.
This year at the Sydney Knife Show, for the first time, I had two tables. I had a table for Hunter Valley blades and I had a table for Tansu knives, and people were asking me, like, what's the difference? I said, as I said, the same line. This is your wants, this is your needs, but this Hunter Valley blades knife might be priced half of what Tansu knives is, but the twice more expensive knife doesn't cut twice better. They
Sure.
both have like similar geometry. They're
Yeah.
both sharpened the same angle. One has a sometimes one has a machine finish, the other one has a hand rub finish.
Right.
This I'm using a cheaper handle material that I can make plenty. And you were talking about selling expensive, like the most expensive knives I sold, they're the ones that I sold. I lost the most money. If I was looking
Oh yeah.
per
Yeah.
hour rate,
Yeah. Yeah. From a business standpoint, yeah.
business standpoint, like my proudest moments, I'm looking at the Instagram reel. They look great, man. But I'm looking, realizing how many hours I spent on it. In the meantime, I could have made like 10 Hunter Valley blades. I could
Right.
have made a lot more money. But again, that comes to the balance. Like there's months I make 10, 15 Hunter Valley blades knives, and I'm like, yep, it's good. But then again, like I'm doing the same stuff over and over. Forge finish, semi or forge finish
Yeah.
stuff. I just want to make something nice. And something comes in my mind, like I'm working on something right now. I'm like, can I pull this off? Let me give it a shot. So that's how I'm trying to have a time of all of them, and also desire to make all of them.
Right.
Because one, if I was just making one, if I was just making swords, I'll be bankrupt. I couldn't afford. Like I'll be.
Yeah.
If I was making just Hunter Valley blades, I will get bored of it. And if I was just
You get
making Tansu
you'd be
knives, I
burned
was
out.
struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good answer. Yeah, and I've actually, if it's only been in the last excuse me, last year or two that I've come to the realization that I the same one that you were just talking about, that if I think about the nicest knives that I've built, I'm not making actually that much money, because I slow down so precipitously that I'm spending not 40 hours, but maybe like 60 hours on one knife.
Yes.
And then sure, maybe I sell it for a few $1,000s, but that few $1,000s across that much time doesn't actually really add up to a whole lot. And what I need to do is something kind of along the lines of what you're doing with the Hunter Valley, to have kind of a more streamlined
Yeah.
utilitarian style knife. And then when I do spend the time, and that's where, like, that's what's paying my bills. That's my bread and butter. That's where the money comes in. But then filling in that extra time or that passion time with these special custom culinary knife builds or side projects of hunters and bowies or swords even,
Hmm.
and doing those more on the side, and then feeling better, a little bit better about the amount of time that I'm spending on that, rather than right now I'm just doing the one-off builds, and it's, I'm only putting out like a 1.5 knives a month, and that doesn't really actually add up to very much,
No.
versus being even being able to do 10 knives at 1,500 or $1,000 or something like that. That adds up really quick.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so I'm trying to figure it out. That balance is really important. I think you're right. And it's so easy to get caught up in trying to sell work for really high numbers and trying to keep, but then reflecting on it and trying to find out how much you're actually making from it, and how much pleasure or value is that actually bringing to you. Like maybe it's a quick dopamine hit, like getting a bunch of likes on a post or something, but that doesn't last.
Yeah.
That doesn't sustain you. And it's
No.
not really like, I don't know. I try to think about like long-term legacy,
Hmm.
and I want to get tools out into the world that are really high quality tools. I obviously need to get paid, but at the same time, I'm not trying to rake somebody over the coals to be able to make that money, or to be able to own one of those pieces. And so trying to find that balance where I'm actually, where a lot of people are like trying to push up and trying to get as much money as they can from where they're at currently. I'm trying to actually come back down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, if you were to one of the best thing happened to me was Hunter Valley Blades, because I had to learn all different new set of skills. It
Sure.
makes you a lot better knife maker.
Yeah.
Another thing that helped me a lot was giving knife making classes. I do 1 day forged knife making classes. Like within a day, people are leaving my shop with the knife that looks like Hunter Valley Blades,
Mm.
same standards, and
Wow.
that taught me a lot. Again, Sydney Knife Show, I made a knife, small petty knife, 150 millimeters. It's made from my own crucible steel, 1.8% carbon, and I made a full tank integral with the tapered tank.
Yeah.
So being a full tank, I had to have like the nice curve right in front of the bolster and having the same right behind the bolster, so I can
Right.
fit the scales. All the scales are heirlooms. Okay, so none of it gets
Right.
out. Like scales are heirloom, the tang is tapered, and all that.
Yeah.
So I spent like 40 hours on a small piece of knife, and I'm looking at a knife right next to it, same size, Hunter Valley blades, cost probably 1/3 of it. But
Sure.
I spent 1/10 of a time.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, which one is more satisfying, getting the likes or being able to sell one and having like, yeah, I'm okay for this month.
Yeah. Is that piece you were just talking about? Is it this one? Oh no, it's not this one. This one's a hidden
No, not
tang.
that one.
Did you send me
Yeah,
the
that was
picture?
no, I didn't. It's in
Okay.
my videos. It doesn't show nice on the. It
On the
doesn't show
Instagram.
much on the. Yeah,
I
you have to
gotcha.
be able to see the video, like to see the old around the tang and the
Right.
pattern. It's really challenging, man. Sometimes with this.
Yeah. And if people want to see Mert's fancy stuff, it's Tansu. Am I saying your last name right?
Tansu.
Tansu.
Yeah.
TANSU knives on Instagram. And or underscore. Sorry. Oh, and it's all backwards. Jesus, I'm so stupid. But anyways, TANSU underscore knives. Just so
Yes.
you can have that as a reference to go check his stuff out.
Every night show, people come at me like, you picked Tansu because it's Japanese, right? I'm like, Tansu means cupboard in Japanese. If I was to pick a Japanese name to sound cool, I will pick like a something that means like the rising moon dragon ninja shit, Like I wouldn't be picking cupboard.
Cupboard.
Cupboard, yeah.
That's where all the good stuff's stored, is in the cupboard. That's
It's in the cupboard.
hilarious. Oh my god, that's so funny. Yeah, the Hunter Valley. That's so cool because I actually forgot that you were doing that. I remember
Yeah.
when you announced it, and I completely forgot. And I'm glad you brought it up because it is a good resource for people to see, and just to get some influence or inspiration on what can be done and still make a good living. Because again, I think a lot of us, honestly, at least I'm speaking for myself. I have a tendency to chase the approval. Honestly, like I'll spend hours and hours and days making steel and forging a blade and grinding and doing all the shit and doing it, trying to hit at all the points perfectly so that I can get the hearts and I can get the approval of my friends and stuff like that. But ultimately, like, that's not what's paying the bills. What's paying the bills is working in a meaningful way to actually get shit turned around and out the door so you can actually pay your bills. And yeah, I really
Michael,
struggle with that in a big way.
you have the eye, okay? If you put out something that you know what you've done, I think me getting my own approval is sometimes getting better than getting few. Like sometimes I post a
Mm,
knife, I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's getting more likes than that, something that I'm more proud of.
sure.
Then my own approval, I'm rating it higher than some some people saying, okay, oh, this knife looks great. I'm looking at it, just like forged finish knife. Like, what's so special about it? Like, I can make this in so many times. I think if you know what you know, I think your own approval and you being happy with your own work, I
Yeah.
think is the biggest approval.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to step back because we kind of jumped ahead a little bit. So
Sure.
through the kitchen knife forums, you started meeting
Yes.
collectors and building knives and people. You were I guess you probably started out just as a member of the kitchen knife forums,
I
trying
was a
to
member.
understand. Yeah.
Yep.
And as a knife collector and a knife user before you were a knife maker. And then you started making, and people want to start buying your stuff. And then you started selling to collectors, and more people want to buy your stuff. So
Yep.
how are you balancing that demand with chefing and family life in general? Because you have 2 kids.
2 kids.
Yeah. And so,
back
and
back
everything
when I
all together.
started, I had one kid, and
Yeah.
one of the point, and I realized like I wasn't doing I was doing in half-ass on both. When it came to a point that I had a year-long waiting list, I realized like I was spending either time in the kitchen, or I was spending either time in the shed. I wasn't spending as much as time I would like to spend on my family.
Right. Yeah.
And the quality of my work wasn't improving. I don't think it was regressing because I was still at the beginning, but the biggest change happened when I became full time, that I didn't have that rush. Like, you have a day off, you have to get this done regardless.
Mm, right.
That that changes your quality, that changes your perception, because
Yeah.
it was like I had a day off, I need to get it done. You're getting it done, but sometimes it's better to put it away, come back next day and look at it. Because a lot of times, if you're working on the same knife over and over, you look at it, your eyes are getting used to the mistakes of it,
Yeah.
and you don't see it. You don't see it. Like, you work on it, you finish it.
Yeah.
Versus if you put it on the side and you come back next day, you're like, man, that looks ugly. What have I done here? Or like, my grinds are dodgy. Like, the lines are all over. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah. I have the opposite. I look at my stuff and I'm like, God, this is a piece of shit. And instead of throwing it across the room or into the wall or into the floor, I try to calm down. I set it down and I leave it sometimes upwards of a week. And then I come back and I look at the knife and I'm like, oh, actually, that's not that bad.
Not that.
I'm like, oh, that's actually good. All right. I was just like, I sometimes I see them too much to the point where I'm just like, this is a piece of fucking garbage. And get rid of it.
Man, I've sometimes I traded my knives in. Like, I bought knives back so I can
Oh,
destroy them.
oh wow.
Or so like, do you want? I'll make you something newer. Do you want them? Like, yeah, okay, give me that one.
Wow.
The gold
See,
grinder. Bzzz.
yeah, wow. I've wanted and I've offered to uh owners of early work to regrind the blades because I know I wasn't doing the same. I think heat treat and stuff was dialed in, it was doing good, but it's just like the performance of the blade and how deep I was etching the Damascus was probably too
Mhm.
deep on some of the early stuff, and the grinds probably were not where they should be, and so regrinding it would be ideal too, and maybe even resculpting the handles some because my early handles were a little bit on the bulkier side, and so dialing those in too and refining those a bit. But that also then ultimately that adds time too. Like, how do you afford to take that time away from making money to fix some of that shit? But I still offer it no
I
matter what.
I wouldn't
But
I wouldn't call it fixed, Mariko, because you were doing your best with the knowledge you had at the time.
sure, yeah,
Okay,
I was.
and if there was something wrong with it, yeah, you'll fix it. But that's what you did back then.
Yeah.
I made peace with that, because I had, like, with so many knives out there, and I can't, like, yet. And sometimes knives come back, and I'm like, shit, this is better than I remembered. Like, that happened to me too.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
somebody sent the knife back. I'm like, one of my early knives, I opened the box thinking like, oh, is it gonna be? No, I realized like, shit, really nice. I really liked it. Yeah, I didn't like the handle shape. I didn't like the profile of the knife, but in terms of grinds and things like that, I realized I was a bit more harsh on myself.
Mm, yeah. Um. Yeah. It's interesting the idea of trying to get new work back, and I still offer kind of a spa day service.
Yeah.
Yeah, because especially with Damascus stuff, you know, every once in a while, it doesn't hurt to send it back in to
Yeah.
be
Re-etch it.
thinned. Yeah, thin the knife maybe and re-etch, especially re-etch it. And my etching techniques are so much better now than when I first started out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think the etching and the finish is what gets me. Like, I had a knife back the other day. This
Okay.
gentleman bought plenty of kitchen knives in 2017, 18, and he didn't use them, and he wanted to sell him. And I saw him on the kitchen knife forums again. I contacted him and said, please send the knife over, because it was a differentially heat treated knife, hardened knife. And
Yeah.
I said to him, like, now how I finish him makes him look better than what it is right now.
Yeah. That's
Like,
actually
in
something
those instances, I reach out.
yeah. And actually I have seen knives trade exchange hands or found out about it afterwards, and I'll see the
Yeah,
pictures and I'd be like, fuck, man, I wish that they had sent it to me first. I would have, one, I would have happily refinished it, but two,
yeah,
just so that when it did change hands, it felt like that person was getting a brand new knife. Because
definitely.
again, even though they understand that, at least for those knives that I've seen of my work that's been sold on a secondary market, essentially, they know it's a secondhand knife. Still, there's some of that. I feel like there, at least I think that there's some of the what it looks like and stuff reflects back on the original maker
Yeah,
some, and I'm just like, I want whoever is getting a knife, whether it's brand new or on the secondary market, for it to look like it's brand new no matter what. I've even offered to help not only refinish the knife but help to sell knives, because
yeah.
I know people that want to buy the shit,
Hmm.
but I just can't make them fast enough. And so I'd be
Yeah.
happy to help connect them with somebody to sell a knife. But yeah, I've seen a couple that got that exchanged hands, and I'm like, damn it. I wish I had had a chance to clean that up before you got it.
And I had a similar but opposite exchange.
Okay,
Somebody was selling my knife, and I'm like, man, like it's going a lot less than what I was selling for,
sure.
and then the gentleman bought the knife, and I had a message from somebody. Hey, just checking. I bought this knife thinking this was a Hitachi Bluetooth Honyaki differential heat treat. I'm like, yeah. Looking at the handle of the knife, and he's like, I can't see hamon. I'm like, what do you mean you can't see the hamon? The guy sent me a picture. So I think the seller sold the knife, used my stock pictures, but he decided to
Oh,
clean up with the 180 grit sandpaper or
oh
steel
my
wool.
god.
Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I saw the pictures, and I did a FaceTime with the guy, and I even offered to buy back. I said, look, man,
Yeah.
and he had a really bad experience purchasing it because he bought something and he opened the package and it wasn't what he's looking for.
Yeah.
At the end, I refurbished the whole thing. It looked like as if it's leaving my shop for the first time. Yeah, I still
Nice.
charged a little bit, but in the what I've charged, I would have made 200 Valley Blaze knives. But
Sure.
that was more like I just want my work to be out there looking right.
Yeah.
Because as
Me
you
too.
know, not everybody has the skills to keep these things like not everybody uses their tools properly, man. You know it.
Right.
Like not everybody treats these things right.
You saw my refurbished video I did a few months back, right?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh,
Is that
dude,
one of
I got one back that it was one of my first commission knives. And so it was like almost 10 years old.
was it the maple handle? Maple was the
No,
maple burr?
it had oh geez, I can't even remember what it was called. But anyways, it wasn't maple. It was a different handle material, but the blade was fucked up. And fortunately the person was like, "Oh, it was a little Santoku." So they're like, "The handles or the blade's too heavy." And so I was like, "Great." Because I was only doing convex grinds at the time, so I was like, "I'll do an S grind on it. That'll lighten up the blade." And I like reground it, hand sanded it, remarked it, everything. It ended up looking beautiful, and it lightened up the blade. But holy smokes, it looked like fucking dog shit before it got back to me. It was bad, and I feel bad because, people just got caught up with life and stuff, and they get lazy with things. But yeah, it was a rough one for sure. I'm gonna see if I can find the video and send it to you. Here it is. I'm sending it to you on. Well, wait, you were doing the things for your phone, so you won't be able to look at it anyways.
No, I won't be able to,
You
man.
you look at it later. But okay, so you were talking about the quality of life, and your family was young, and you were either in the kitchen or you were in the shop, and you
Yeah.
were not getting as much time. So it seems like you came to the understanding that you had to pick one or the other. How did you decide to move on with kitchen knife making or knife making and leave behind culinary as a profession?
So
Like, was there a
this
monetary point where like you were
no, no,
making
no.
enough, or was
No,
just
it was
quality of
definitely not like that, man. Like, look,
okay.
my wife can't cook. She can't cook. Like, she can barely boil water to save her life. Love you,
Okay.
honey. And like, she'll
My wife's the
sometimes
same way, by the way. So I love her. You
like
gotta
some,
love them.
sometimes she will call me like just before I'm plating up for 300 people, and I'll put on the loudspeaker. And she'd be like, "There's no rice at home." I'm like, "Honey, it's easy. Equal amounts of water, equal amounts of rice. Put them into like I've seen in the movies. People like the passengers will take over the pilot duties and land the airplane easier. But I'm trying to explain her like, bring it to six. Do you see like is it boiling? Yeah, it's boiling. Okay, wait till all the water evaporates in the rice. Okay, then turn it down. And so she calls me sometimes like when I'm at work and
Yeah.
I'll answer the phone like, is it urgent? So she'll call me like saying, I'm making ham cheese like I'm making grilled cheese, but mine doesn't taste as good. What am I doing wrong? I'm like, I'm busy, I'm cooking. Bye. I'll hang up. And
Shit.
she'll call me stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it was April 1st. She called me 2:30. Like I got like two more tables to send out the lunch. I'm looking at the phone.
Yeah.
She called. Like, she's not hanging up. I said, "Is it urgent?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm in the ambulance." I'm like, "Oh crap, what happened?" So my wife went to a volleyball tournament. She's a former athlete as well. She was
Okay.
playing volleyball, and she said, "I think I done my ACL."
Oh
I'm like,
shit.
"Okay." I said to guys, like, "Guys, I gotta go." And so drove to the hospital, and we made sure somebody was like watching our kids and all that.
Yeah.
And so she thinks she's on ACL, and but she can't walk, she can't put any balance on it. And then we realized a few days later she ruptured her patella tendon. Her patella tendon, yeah. So she was on crutches for 2 months, 3 months, something like that.
Oh my god.
And we have no family here. So like her family is in US, my family is in Turkey, and
Yeah.
we got friends, but we realized, man, like we stretched down so thin. And I was bringing babysitters so they can watch my kids while my wife is just laying on in the bed. And I
Right.
was really lucky when I was working in the kitchen. Like I was the exec chef, but my boss was really understanding. If something went wrong with the kids, I told him, "Look, man, I gotta go."
Yeah.
Because since she worked farther from home, I'll be the parent that taking the kids to school,
Yeah.
picking back up. I was the parent that would live closer to home,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of times with the young kids, like they're coughing, they're sick, pick them up from the school, or
Right.
uh, and I was that parent, and boss was understanding. But I realized, man, like both of us can't be uh, managers with a lot of uh, responsibilities and things like that. And
Right.
that opened our eyes. And my wife's cousin, she lived with us for a year, and she was our like nanny au pair kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I said to my wife, like, when she leaves, I'm going to be full-time knife maker.
Mm.
And she was freaking out, like, oh, just find something, do a knife on the sides. I'm like, no, no, I have to make this call. Like, it was completely out of like we had to.
Yeah.
It was not a financially beneficial situation because I was comfortable in my other job. Like I had a good job. Like it was when it was busy, when it hurt. But I knew when it was going to hurt, and it was only a few times a year.
Yeah.
When we had concerts, when we had big functions, yeah, I was cooking for like 1,500, 2,000 people over a weekend in a
Oh,
tiny, tiny two kitchens, and
yeah.
it was like getting stuff was issue. Folding the cardboard boxes. I had somebody sometimes like 6, 7 hours taking cardboard boxes into recycle because you'll get like a ton of something.
Yeah.
And our kitchen wasn't designed for that. Yeah. So, and I had to make that call.
Yeah.
Now I get to see my family. I get to see my kids. And is knife making full time dream job for everybody? No, it's not.
Right.
As you know, like
No,
it's not.
it's
It's
not.
and you're starting at cabin fever, and there are ups and downs, and it's frustrating. But I had to make this regardless of the outcome. I had to have this because like today I'm gonna take my kids to basketball. I'm going to
Yeah.
be I'm spending time with them, man. Like I couldn't do it while I was chefing. And
Right.
if I was in the US, I wouldn't be in the same room to have kids with my wife long enough. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's something more and more I'm trying to wrap my head around because I used to think that, the goal was to make as much money as possible. But what I've started to try to figure out over the last couple of years, and I'm definitely not there yet, but just trying to figure out, what is enough, because with with more money usually requires more time out of the house and more time away from family. And I'm trying to think about what is most important to me in my life. Am I going to look back on my deathbed and really glad that I spent those extra hours and those extra days working in the shop, or am I going to regret not having that time with my family that I could have had? And I'm trying to keep that in perspective. Um, when I'm trying to think about, getting extra time in the shop and so I'm actually really, I would love to be able to shorten my days down to where either I'm working shorter days and I'm hanging out with my kid in the afternoon after he gets home from school, or I'm working fewer days so that when my kid so that I'm getting more time with the kid basically on the weekends. And my family, not just the kid, but the family on the weekend. And so trying to figure that out and trying to figure out what is that number or that comfort zone where sure you could make more money, but is that worth everything else that goes along with it?
I think the
And
key is
yeah,
having a sustainable, like work, sustainable hours. Like when I first started making knives the full time, like I didn't know what to do, man. Like I was working like as if I was running two jobs. Like
right.
back then when I was chefing, I'll put the kids in the bed and I'll get back in the shed and I'll work from like 8:30 to 11:30.
Right.
And now, so then I became a full-time maker, and I will do the same thing. I'll work till like 6. We'll have dinners. After dinner, like I'll put the kids down in bed. 8:30, 11, I'll work, and I'll come next day. I'm looking, whatever I've done it from 8 to 11:30 looks like dog shit, because I
Hmm.
was doing it. I was tired, and I was spending my morning trying to fix what I've done. And I said, you know what?
Oh wow.
I'm working 96. I'm working once it's 6 o'clock, man. I'm done.
Yeah.
If I have a knife show coming up, I may work extra here and there, but I'm working till it's getting dark,
Yep.
and it's dinner time with the family. That's it, and I don't go back after dinner anymore. I think last year I gone once or twice, but they were just like the glue handles of a blaze they already fitted in.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't go I don't go past after dinner. Like I have dinner, I'm having a glass of wine or two or three, who's counting. I'm
I'm
done,
not.
man.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm done because the quality of work after working all day, it's deteriorating. Like it's not sustainable either.
Yeah.
I'll work over the weekends. I'll work like sometimes I'll do like a one long Saturday or one long Sunday. But I used to do like still 60, 70 hours, and after 45, 50, whatever I was putting extra was not worth it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. More time does not equal necessarily quality time.
No, no.
No. And yeah, I've
And
tried
I
to.
got routines, man. Like I got routines. Like I believe in routines. Even when I used to play basketball, I got routines of doing things. Now,
Sure.
one of my routines is I forge every week, once a week. I try to forge Monday or Tuesday. I just
Nice.
forge.
That's a
I
good way
forge,
to
man,
start the week.
regardless.
Yeah.
Forge something. Because, I mean, for your case, you're making a lot of those pattern welded integral stuff. Yours is
Yeah.
going to be difficult. But with my case, I'll take my steel, I'll take, let's say, 50 to 100. And something that I learned from the kitchens is I learned how many grams I need to get me a 240 mil euro.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah.
like just like my cooking days. You put the piece of tendon on the scale. You see how many ounces it is, and you need 8 ounces. You divide it. Okay, four. You get four 8 ounces plus or six, whatever. Then plus two small medallions. Okay. Same thing with the steel. I weigh my steel. I know
Yeah.
how many grams or ounces I need per knife. I cut it into that pre-measured scales, and I know whenever I'm forging, I know exactly what I have. So it takes that guesswork out. And if I'm consistent with my forging, every time I'm getting within like a couple of mils to the
Right.
specs. It might be a taller mill or two, it might be longer mill or two, but I get the same result pretty much.
That's great. I was just gonna do because you're actually not the first maker to say that. How many grams?
Um, if I want to get like a 320 is a sweet number. 320 is sweet number. It will give me enough thickness for my spine. Yeah,
This is
320 is it.
This is the math I just did, and I know it's backwards on your screen. Oh, geez, it's not showing, but it's 320. But that's how many I need for a 220 millimeter integral hidden tang chef's knife.
So I have a different math for integrals as well. Integrals, it adds 50% more.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I do cubic inches. I do it by, so I just did the math for how many cubic inches, and that's what the math worked out to be. 320 grams is 2.2 cubic inches, and that's what I need to forge a 220 millimeter integral chef's knife. Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. That's so funny. I've never done that. I've never done the weight thing, but you're the second maker I've talked to that does the weight thing. And I'm like, I have never weighed the steel. I've never weighed it. I've always done the cubic inches. I've done it by
with
volume.
your case, because you're doing integrals, you need to look at cubic inches. But with me doing, especially with the Hunter Valley blazes, if I'm saying myself, I'm going to make set of petties.
Yeah.
And this is the laminate I've done. Like, let's say this is my mild steel, the blue steel laminate. How many I'll get out of it? So I'll put it on a scale. It's 8. Okay, then I'll cut them in the equal 8 lengths. And
interesting.
Same thing. Same
that
thing
makes
over and over.
sense. Yeah, especially if you're weighing a whole bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't work with the big bars anymore. I'm trying to do like a 1 knife or 2 knife bar at a time.
Okay.
Because I find myself a lot faster. Yes, maybe it takes me longer to cut them, but from something that looks like, hang on, I mean, this is about the size I start.
Okay.
What is this? 1.5 inches for American friends, 4 inches, and probably 1 inch. So I'll turn this into a gyro in 4 heats.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's because I've gotten so proficient at it, doing it over and over.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. Holy shit. So you build time. I love that you got the Hunter Valley thing going and that you build time in, because I feel like and it's interesting because there's so many young makers joining the field. It'll be interesting to see how they, as they get older, how they adjust, or if they just go away or figure out things out or whatever, how they change or transition over time. Because I feel like the makers that I started out with, again, a lot of talented makers who started back in about 2012, have families or getting married. They need more, they're getting older, they need more consistency in their life. They're not chasing, fame or anything. They're really just trying to be fucking comfortable and happy, being able to keep a roof over their head, food in their bellies, take care of their family, maybe travel here and there. And that's really where a lot more of their priorities are starting to transition to, or at least have transitioned to. Yeah. And so it's just
some left the field completely, man. Like some people said, you know what, this is fun, but I got a real job, and some are not making anymore. And it's an interesting field, man. Like you see a lot of people enter again. With the COVID, we saw so many people with the lockdowns. We saw so many people getting the hobby.
Yeah.
And everybody bought steel. Everybody bought grinders and all that.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen to those guys who started now?
Right.
Some I see already selling their grinders, and some of the established makers are going back to their full-time job and saying, look, I want to do it for side hustle.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, especially as you get older and you have more responsibilities, I've even kind of thought about contemplating getting a real job so that I could have health insurance and have a paycheck that banks are going to look at and say, yes, you look like a person, on paper at least, you look like a person who's bringing in a reliable amount of money every month. So we will loan you money so you can buy a home. Like being a business owner and trying to buy a house right now fucking sucks.
I believe, bro, because we had to refinance, and I had to prove my income and all that. It's they don't look at you the same. Like,
no.
What's your occupation again?
Yeah, they look at you like you're a fucking drug dealer or something. You're doing some sketchy shit, I can tell. You look like one of them.
My kids used to be in a private school. They used to be in a private school when I was chefing, and bro, you see get to see all those parents, like ladies with their joggers and full on makeup. They'll drop the kids off or pick them up, and there's a
Yep.
cafe in front of the school. Like the parents are sipping their coffee and everything, like
Yep.
espressos and stuff like that. And I leave the house right from forging or grinding. I got steel. I got steel. Like my t-shirts are like they're almost like sparkly with all the. I
Oh,
got
you're
man
sure.
glitter. I got the man
Man
glitter
glitter.
from the man glitter, all the steel shavings and all that. Like hands looking like homeless, and I'll get the looks like "Ew," coming like are you, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I usually look almost all the time. My kid goes to a private school. It's not like a super fancy one. It's just a private school,
Yeah.
and but yeah, a lot of people there are very affluent and and very well dressed and looking sharp in the morning. And I look like I'm basically homeless and wearing like ratty ass clothes, dirty clothes, and either going to the shop or coming from the shop. And yeah, it's interesting.
It's
So.
like the meme from Simpson. Like there's a guy, and I think it's in the subway, and it says, "I'm not homeless. I'm a world famous blacksmith."
Oh, I, I have not seen that one, but
Oh,
that
I'm
is
gonna
fucking
find
funny.
it.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah, Simpsons knew it all, man. Simpsons knew it all.
Yeah. I want to tap into some of your recent work with Wootz and Crucible steels because I feel
Yes.
like that's got to feel really cool to kind of tap into um, some of your cultural heritage.
Yeah.
Um, and so please tell me about like where that started, how you started. I mean, obviously your love for swords started really young, but when you started to learn more about the history of how those swords were made and the steels that they were made from and how to make it yourself and where you're going with it, you're forging your culinary knives and other projects out of that steel. Where do you see that going as well?
Well, it came as in like it's a picture. I had to connect the dots.
Okay.
I was looking at the picture, but I didn't know what I was looking at till I started to connect the dots together.
Okay.
So when I went to museums, I knew all the Turkish swords had like these nice patterns on it. Then I start people referring something as a Damascus steel, and I'm thinking what I saw here and what people are saying Damascus wasn't the same thing. To
Hmm.
realize one day, I I watched a documentary of late Alpendre and said, yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's that, yeah. Then I mean, you don't know much then because you're seeing people talking about it. Then you start seeing the difference between pattern welded steel and the crucible steel. And it was Peter Burt, your old shopmate.
Yeah.
In 2018, I saw he was selling the steel. I'm like, oh, that's it. That's what I'm talking about. Then I used the steel. Then in the meantime, I was trying to make tamagane. And the thing with the
Okay.
tamagane is, so a lot of the guys get in the kitchen knives. They get in the Japanese knives. They make Japanese style knives. And
Right.
I think to finish the circle, or they make katana. You know,
Sure.
and
They
because
graduated
that's
from chef's knife to
yeah,
katana.
because that's what all the cool kids do. Like if you don't have a katana, you don't. And
Yeah.
although I have a katana, I like katanas, but culturally, never, I didn't I didn't feel connected to it.
Okay.
I got no connection with it. And interesting enough, my mother's last name, maiden name, Kılıç. Kılıç last name was given to only the swordsmiths.
Oh
Then
wow.
to later, I learned that my great grandfather was actually he was axe smith. He was forging axes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, had no idea. But apparently, this was in the family.
That was your mother's grandfather.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. That's cool.
my grandfather apparently he was forging axes too. But
Yeah.
I always knew him as the guy. He built buildings, he built apartments. But
Okay.
he inherited it from his father, and Kılıç being last name, it was always in our family to do swords and things.
Yeah.
And when I start getting more into crucible steel and realize, reading the N. Feuerbach's paper about the origins of crucible steel in Central Asia, and I start connecting dots, and I'm like, I can make tamagane, but making tamagane I have no cultural connection to it, versus crucible steel being something that we used over thousands of years.
Right.
And I was actually in Istanbul. I was in a military museum, and I was looking at all these beautiful swords. Man, I was such a geek. I was a kid in a candy shop.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite shapes or blades?
Look, my favorite shapes, I will say more like the periods. My favorite style is
Hmm.
15th to 16th century early classical period. And if you guys want to learn more about the swords and the types, a friend of mine, Kılıç Osman Başkurt, he's a swordsmith based in Turkey. He's a living treasure.
Okay.
I don't know if you know him.
Is he on Instagram? I don't know.
Yep,
Oh, he
he's on
is.
Instagram. Yeah,
What's his page? It's
K
Killer.
I yeah Kılıç Osman. Actually,
Oh
Jordan
yeah, I got him.
and yeah,
Okay. Oh shit, I'm already following him. That's
yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, his oh yeah, yeah, his work is very good.
He's doing museum quality stuff.
So it's
And
K I, just real quick, it's KILIC underscore OSMAN underscore BASKURT. And he does awesome stuff. Okay, sorry, continue, please. It's very good.
so my favorite pieces were from that early 15th to 16th century.
Okay,
And one of the reason I started making swords for myself, making kılıç for myself, was just like with the kitchen knives. Some of the stuff that I want to make, I want to own, I can't afford. Mareko,
sure.
if you look at the late 18th, 19th century kılıç, which is shorter and a bit more curvy, known as pala,
Okay,
there are plenty in the market because it's relatively newer stuff and there's a lot of them out there. But if you look at the 14th century, 15th century stuff, it's not out there. There's only one or two here and there, and it's in the museums and nobody's selling. And the ones who are selling, I can't afford them. Like, let alone
right.
being able to afford $1,000, $1,500 knife, and these guys are selling for like 50 to $200,000.
Yeah, I believe
And
it.
I collect swords, and I would like to have them. So that's why I'm like, I had to learn how to make it, and with the trial and error, with some help from Osman and another guy, Nico Heinian, another
Oh yeah.
great guy. Nico is a, yeah, I think Nico, Peter Burt, Osman, and they're the wizards of this stuff. So I had to trial and error,
What was
learn
that
it.
word again? What did you call them? The what if? The what?
Wizards. They're wizards
The
of this.
wizards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some of the stuff they do.
Nico's getting some insane pattern.
Yes.
His quote unquote watering steel
Yeah.
is very good.
And he has one of the coolest hashtags. Stock removals for sissies.
Hey, I started with stock removal.
No, like nothing wrong. Like it's really fun to see on his hashtags like hashtag knife community, hashtag something, and the last one is hashtags stock removal for sissies.
Don't let
But
any
again,
of that. Don't let that deter anybody from learning how to stock remove a knife.
I love stock remove, nothing wrong with it, but I'll be feeling sad if I was buying a steel and stock remove it.
Oh yeah, yeah. You
Yeah,
gotta forge that steel.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to play much when you're at the shopmates with Peter?
I only forged a little bit of his steel. I actually think I still have a bar or a chunk or two somewhere, but I'm not sure exactly where they're at. I do have one more chunk of steel that it's made out of the meteorite Wootz.
Oh, nice.
Um, but I think his steel chemistry has changed over
Yeah.
the last few years a little bit in his approach. But okay, so you want to collect. You've been learning about the steel, and now you're making your own Wootz ingots,
Yes.
yeah, and you're forging your
Including
blades.
stainless,
Yeah, what's that like?
bro. Um,
Is
so
that fun to
both,
forge out or what?
no, it's absolutely pain in the ass. But so this is the issue. If you look at a lot of the traditional Wootz recipe, when they're turned into swords, a lot of those swords were barely hardened, or they were
Sure.
hardened at the. If you were to clean them up, as in like sandpaper and etch in ferric, you'll see a lot of the steel was not hardened. But in a form of a sword, it really doesn't make much difference. If you have a mild steel, if you sharpen it,
Yeah.
if you take mild steel, turn it into a sword, sharpen it, versus if you take a Wootz, if you're trying to chop somebody, you're still going to get good success in both. Okay.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
long your edge is going to retain, that's a different question, but
Sure.
they're still going to do the job. But with the traditional sword recipe stuff, I was making blades. They were looking good, pattern is good, but because there's no manganese in them, or because there's no chromium or anything that's going to help them with the deeper hardening, there's none of them. And hardening those thin, long chef knives was really an issue.
Oh.
I was even doing like a water quench, and I was getting like a hardness maybe 5-10 mil above the edge because
Right.
there's no manganese in the steel. You got shitload of carbon and things like that, but it was really hard to harden them.
Right.
Then I start playing with some of the recipes, and I tried some with the chromium, knowing like chromium is going to help with the hardening, and I use 50 to 100 quite a bit. I'm like, yeah, I'll add like a 0.5% in here to see if it's, yeah, it comes out nice, hardens easy, but then all of a sudden the patterns are crap because anything that has chromium etch is really blah gray versus
Oh.
stuff that lacks, yeah, you know, like when you etch 1095 base steels, they etch like nice black, jet
Yep.
black.
Sure.
When you etch 50 to 100, it comes like grayish.
Sure.
So then I'm thinking like, man, I want to, one thing about the stainless is pain in the ass to forge, but when you want to harden them, easy, man. There's none of that. Did I get an auto hammer on? Did the whole thing harden? No. Take that shit out. Either clamp between the plates or oil quench, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And since I was doing a lot of stainless forging, like I was forging Damascus steel like 5 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Like one of the early crazy ones, and I was forging super gold too. And I thought like I forged stainless. Let me have a crack at forging it. Yeah, it's really annoying to get it to shape of a knife, but once it's there, heat treatment is super easy.
Yeah.
You know, it comes out. You still get patterns. It still looks beautiful. I wouldn't want to make integrals out of it. It's really pain in the ass, man. I got a picture
I
on
did
Instagram.
one integral out of Peter's stainless Wootz,
Yeah,
and that was a
not
difficult.
moving,
And
was it?
it was the second one I forged because the first one had issues with it, so I had to do it a second time.
Oh.
Felt good. Feels real good.
I had a picture just to show people the point. Like I forged two steels from the same size, same size ingots.
Yeah.
One of them stainless, one of them carbon, and I forged the puck into a bar. Half an hour. Like in half an hour, I managed to get the carbon one like look into like a bar, pretty much like a, yeah, almost bar.
Yeah.
And the stainless was like barely squished steel ingot. And I got a
Oh.
25 kilo power hammer, which is like 55 pounder and yang.
Yeah.
And my foot, my pedal to the metal, my foot was there, nothing.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And as you know, with the stainless, like when you're forging carbon steel, you can forge 800, you can forge 900. Yeah, don't go 1,000, but
Right.
it's very forgiving. But
Yeah.
the stainless steel is very finicky.
Yep.
Working window is very short.
Yep.
And once it goes past the stage, you gotta stop. I learned that hard way doing a Damascus steel when I was forging Damascus steel. It was not moving. I heat up it more. I hit it up, and all of a sudden, I had like $400 flakes on my power hammer base. The
I
whole
did.
thing just like poof.
Yeah. I think I did that 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
It was an expensive lesson to learn. Yeah.
It was like bang, bang,
Yeah. Bye.
bye.
Do you, when you were making your tamahagane,
Yep.
how are you making it? You were making it yourself, right?
Yes.
With your own little chimney, or
Yes.
did I hear something? I might have asked you before if you're using like forge scale
Use-
flakes or something around the shop.
Forge scale, you can use it.
Yeah.
Somebody was saying I was using the grind bucket. No, I don't use grind bucket
Okay.
because grind bucket has a bunch of shit like ceramic in it.
Okay.
And there is a good video, I think. I'm trying to remember who did it. Is it Emiliano? No. Sunstar Forge? No. What was the
Yeah,
name of the
Suns-
guy? I think it might be his video, or if not, it might be the Niels Provost. It might be one of either of those guys.
Okay.
Basic how to make tamag in a small scale. You can do it. I've done it, but again, I got few weird bits of tamagane that I done it, and then I lost interest and just sitting like a big doorstopper in my shop. But my goal is to turn Tamagane into my own Wootz, so I can say I literally made this shit from scratch.
Yeah. Well, and that was going to be my next question, because I remember, I think it was in the documentary of John Verhoeven,
Yeah,
or sorry, not Verhoeven, but Alpendre,
Alpendre.
and they made they did a bloom. They made a bloom, and then they
Yeah,
broke that up, and then made a crucible steel out of the
yes.
bloomery steel.
So that documentary was really good, but had some irreversible damage to the added to the myth as well. Like
Okay.
you see, people are watching Japanese steel documentary, like Tamagane documentary, and they're seeing steel being folded, and they come to your table. Is your steel folded? I'm like, no, it's monosteel. I don't have to fold it. And then you have to break it down to people saying, hey, they're working with the really primitive steel, and when you get a bloom or Kera, the outside has more carbon, inside doesn't have carbon. There's a lot of slack. To be able to get the homogeneous, you have to fold it. It's like you made a pizza dough, but because you didn't listen, you forgot that salt. So what do you have to do? You have to add the salt. You have to fold it to get it homogeneous.
Yeah.
Same thing with the tamagane. Tamagane, you have to fold it to get homogeneous. And you're not folding this many times because the guy behind the cloudy mountains of Tokyo, Kyoto said it. No, you're doing it to get a good steel. They're doing good with the raw materials they have.
Yeah.
And what did with the Wootz documentary, Al Pendre was saying, oh, they had to find the right ore. That couldn't be far from the truth because they were getting ore from a lot of the other places. And
Oh,
that added the, like, so when I'm talking to people now, like saying I'm making my crucible steel.
yeah.
Do you have the right ore? Like, get the fuck out of here. What right ore, motherfucker? They were using all kinds of ore. They were using wherever
Did
the
you get the
steel.
magical ore?
Yeah,
Jesus.
from the things of the get the fuck out of here, man. They were making crucible
The
steel
elven
from all the way
dingleberries.
from Merv to Khorasan to Istanbul to you know even like all the way to the Balkans. They were
Yeah.
making it. It wasn't like a this are we gonna get the right ore? They produced the steel. They got the raw iron, and wherever it was, where there was charcoal available in the small centers, they turned into a crucible steel.
Yeah.
But the biggest issue I think comes from people who are reading this thing. They can only read one language, and they're relying on the Google Translate of all the documents.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Okay, Google Translate is not the best for scientific research or historical research.
Sure.
And a lot of people who are trying to decode this myth per se, they don't know much about the region's history or history in general. And they're trying to approach like with today's solutions.
Okay.
How things are today must be like that back then. No. So just like we were talking about, you see how the food is coming from. You see how the food grows. So in the back time, people were not sending tons of steel from one continent to the other by ship because it wasn't feasible.
Right.
So the eBay, Amazon didn't exist back then.
What?
What? Yeah. What do you mean you cannot click on something and it will arrive?
Yeah.
So I would
Well,
love to get a documentary done to some of the clean that myth, but I can
yeah.
barely get a YouTube video sorted. I can barely stand myself making a video for 4 minutes. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I'm sure you love hearing this question at shows, and you got Cambria coming up. So tell me, when somebody comes up to you and asks about real Damascus versus Wootz Damascus, what is your conversation like with that?
My conversation is when the Crusaders were fighting Seljuks, they saw the steel or they saw the swords in Damascus. It's like you buying a wine of Whole Foods. Are you calling it Whole Foods wine? The wine might be like
Right.
that's pretty much the analogy. And to replicate it, people came up with the patent welded steel. And patent welded steel was done to replicate it. And now we're calling patent welded steel Damascus. But now I stopped calling it Damascus. I'm just calling it patent welded steel.
Yeah.
Although I might get less interaction in my hashtags, but it's patent welded steel versus
Sure.
crucible steel.
Yeah.
And I don't like. I also have them both. I usually have them both on the table so people can see the difference.
Yeah, well, and I got a picture that you sent me to share, and it might be hard to see the details, but this is the one I used in my calendar,
Yes,
and the activity on there looks like random pattern Damascus, but it is crucible steel.
it is.
And
That was
the
probably
contrast
one of
that
my
you got on
best
that
etch.
is
Yeah,
pretty great.
yeah.
You said that's one
But
of the best
again,
etches you've gotten?
yeah, the issue with the Wootz is like when you make a feather pattern, Marco, you make your crush W's, you
Right.
stack them up, and if you place your cutting tool properly and if you forge weld it properly, every time you're going to get the same results, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. With this one, you might have the perfect chemistry, you might have the consistent chemistry. The how aggressive you forge sometimes makes the steel look a lot different. Like I had a knife that I had one of my earlier my steels that I turned into a little like integral boning knife.
Yeah.
And I think it might be in one of the emails I sent you earlier, not the one from yesterday, but
Oh, okay.
it was an integral boning knife, and I forged it, I heat treated. There's pattern, okay, looks all right, nice, I'm happy. Actually, I auctioned that knife for Kev's surgery funds.
Oh,
Shout
yeah.
out to my friend Big Kev.
Big Kev.
And the remaining of the steel I forged into a chef knife. And if you put these steels side by side, night and day,
Mm,
couldn't be any different. Same temperatures, same heat treatment, everything same. I think that challenge of it, like trying to, it's like it's a cliche, but people say like that's like each pattern is like a snowflake, you cannot repeat it. Yeah, that is 100% true.
yeah.
With the
Sure.
with the I respect those mosaic Damascus and things like that stuff, but if you do exactly what you're supposed to do, they come out every time same.
Yep.
And with the crucible steel, like it'll be like a snowflake. You cannot replicate identically. Whoever
Sure.
said that they can, they're lying. They cannot replicate the whole thing.
Yeah.
It'll look similar, patterns. It won't be the same.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's really impressive with what Nico's doing with the Wootz material is he's getting really great activity, what I would consider, especially from antique um pieces that I've seen photographs of.
Yeah.
Some of the best stuff was like armor. Very rarely actually did the swords have the same quality of pattern activity that Nico's getting in his steel now. Um,
Nico's pattern is as close as it gets to historical ones.
yeah,
In some instances, Osman is replicating historical patterns too.
yeah,
But yes, but again, the stuff that survived are the armors that never been used.
sure, yeah, yeah,
That was all like the when I was in Istanbul, I was in the military museum. There was a one nice steel wood steel college from 15th century, and you can tell this thing is a soldier sword. It's seen so many like there's nicks on its edge.
oh
It's
wow,
been resharpened. It's been used and abused, and it
wow,
hasn't been just like used. Like imagine a chef knife used and abused in the kitchen for a year or two.
sure,
This thing has seen it. This thing has seen a lot of stuff.
yeah, yeah, interesting. I think some of my most interesting, or is it the blades that draw my attention the most are wait, is the Khyber knife, is that a Turkish weapon?
No, that's from Hyper knife. You'll see it from modern day Afghanistan. But
Okay.
another issue with the naming these regions, when it was made, some of the countries' borders were not same.
Okay.
So modern day Afghanistan is as close as it gets.
Okay. And then what is it? I think it's called the Yatagan.
Yatan.
How do you say it again?
So there's a G, but in Turkish there's a little line on top of the G. We call it soft G. Instead of reading that G, you're just repeating the vowel in front of it. Yatan.
Oh,
Like
interesting. Yatan.
imagine there's
Okay.
yeah, Yatan.
Yeah.
Some
Interesting.
of the Yatan have like really nice shapes. Like some of them look like Gothic. The they're beautiful tools, man. Like
They're
Yatan is
so
really
cool.
cool.
I want to build one of those. I would love to make an an ingot and then forge a yatan out of it.
You don't see many crucible steel yatan. A lot
Really?
of the yatans you see in the market are older stuff. So crucible steel was really common. But what happened was with the industrial revolution, steel was getting a lot cheaper to build. And where you have tiny craftsmen working in the small shops trying to make like one ingot at a time, couple ingots at a time, forge into steel. The steel production in Solingen and Sheffield was ramping up,
Yeah.
and at the time they were selling steel or they were making steel. So a lot of the yatans see nowadays in the market are made with the Turkish twist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and if you etch them, you'll see all Turkish twist, and sometimes you'll see a again Turkish twist on top, the top pattern, top bar, but it'll
Yeah.
be a wrought iron Turkish twist. But the edge will be
Oh,
sometimes mono steel. But yeah, it's all Turkish twist,
oh,
and
very
it was
interesting.
more like a blister steel because uh, like to be able to check the carbon content, some people do in the blister steel, and if it turns very easy, that means there's not much carbon. But if it turns really stiff, that means a lot of carbon. And
Yeah.
when they were finding the right medium, the right amount of carbon,
Sure.
they were twisting it and putting 7 bars on top of each other. That's how it was born.
Oh,
7 layers,
really?
like four looking this way, three looking that way.
So it wasn't intentionally to make a pattern. It was testing the quality of the steel.
That's one theory
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
because it's only like four, five. Do I have one in here somewhere in my knife case. I have one. It's you can when you look at closer, you can see the weld flaws, and
Yeah.
it clearly shows like the some of the lines of the forge weld. I had a beautiful tool and I sold it not long ago.
Hmm.
But yeah, they're all 7 bar Turkish twist, but they are forged and stretched. You can tell like the twist is actually the angle is starting to
Really laid
change a bit
over,
because yeah, laid over
elongated. Yeah.
because it's not stuck anymore. They're forging the whole thing to a shape.
That's so interesting. I had no. Now I have a book. It's not the greatest book, but I have a book about historical weapons,
Mhm.
and there's some yatans in there, and I should look at them a second time because
So
I had no
Yatan
idea.
was born as a sidearm, as a dagger,
Right.
as like a long knife, as like a long messer.
Yeah.
And a lot of the historical arms experts look at the Yatan and say, actually, give me a second, I'll pull out a Yatan.
Okay.
Speaking of it,
He'll be right back.
I'll be right back.
What? Let's see. I'm trying to remember what these other knives are that I pulled in. We got looks like a boning knife or fillet, another crucible steel blade,
You're
and
talking about Peshkabs most likely.
Peshkovs. Oh, is that what that is? The integral?
Peshkabs or card. The integral one is called as card.
Okay, yeah, card.
So this is similar to card,
Oh,
but this is
yeah,
a boning knife.
I got you. Yeah.
So this one is Yatan. This one is with the walrus ivory handle.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's a started with the gemstones. I think this is a what was it? Not ruby. What was the green one? Emerald.
Emerald, yeah.
Yeah, emerald. This had nice gold inlays and so overlays and all that, but stuff fell. Anyway, so when you a lot of the historical arms expert look at this weapon and say, no, doesn't have a crossguard, it shouldn't be performing and all that. But what they forget to take into account was during the Ottoman era, civilians were not allowed to carry swords.
Mm.
Okay, so only the soldiers are allowed to carry swords. And what defines a sword is crossguard. And
So they just took the cross guard off.
well, they never put crossguards and yatan. That's something that was like a 14-inch blade that you were carrying on sideways on your waist.
Yeah.
They made it longer, and it became like 24 inches because it had no crossguard, and technically you were not carrying a weapon.
Yeah.
A
Wow.
lot of people, the size of yatan got longer and longer and longer, and people were carrying a sword without breaking the rules.
Yeah.
So the idea about the crossguard came because you want to carry a sword. That makes it legal to carry. You're carrying a knife.
Yeah.
And that's why if you look at a lot of the writings on them, a lot of them will have saying like, whoever looks at me sideways shall get the wrath of this skinny axe or my long knife. They will always refer it as a long knife. And
Interesting.
they're really like blade heavy, like forward heavy.
Sure.
And you're looking at the handle, like why the handle is so big. And it makes sense because when you're trying to swing at it, the long part is actually stopping falling out of your hand.
Right. Yeah, it's so cool.
Ta-da.
I love it. That's a nice one.
This is a good one. Actually, this is not my favorite. Now I'll pull my favorite if you have a second.
Let's see. We got some comments over here in the chat. What do we got going on here?
This
Greg
one is my favorite because
okay.
this has a massive handle, and
Oh, wow,
it's probably
yeah.
made for somebody that has a giant hands. And I got large hands too, but this feels perfect.
Yeah.
This feels perfect.
And how is that inlay or the overlay work being done on those?
I think this is chase and repulse. I think that's raised,
Oh yeah, sure.
and they're using
Is it
they
like
got
silver
little
soldered on?
no silver stamping, like they got stamp looking things, and they pretty much like open the whole thing up on a flat,
Yeah.
and they're chase and repulse, like punch it in and form it and flip it over and over. And it is, Marco, this is kitchen knife thin. If you look at the edge,
Whoa.
you can't see it, but I'm looking at, bro, it's kitchen knife thin. Not
That's
like
impressive.
kitchen knife thin. And they got a hollow grind in some of them.
Yeah.
And because of the grinding wheels, I mean, they had to do hollow grind. They had nothing like,
Yep.
they had no flat platen. Everything had to be hollow grind or convex sort of. But this is hollow grind and made for large hands.
That's great. How thick is the spine?
This spine goes about like starts with 5 mil, and doesn't taper too much on this one. But some of my shamshirs, like the tip goes like from 10 centimeters or like 4 inches or so. Spine drops down to like 1.5 mil, 2 mil. Some of them have great distal taper.
Okay.
I'll pull out swords all day if you want to talk about antique stuff.
No, I just got to come down there and hang.
You know, you have the standing invitation, man.
Yeah.
I asked you before.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I'm trying to think where to go next. So what is your plan? Are you planning to do more of your crucible steel blades and continue to explore different forms and shapes using and doing more hybrids, kind of like this card fillet knife, which I think is a really good look. I think it's super cool. I like that a lot.
Michael, I have to. I don't know if you can find it. It's probably in my old Instagram posts. And I post a knife, and I ask people like, "Hey guys, what do you guys think? Like, when do you think this knife is originated?" And I had people saying, "Oh, this is Wüsthof boning knife." Like, yeah, it's Wüsthof boning knife, bit rusty. And actually, that knife was from 11th century Ghaznavid period. The Turkic tribe that lived at the time near that North Iran or near Afghanistan region, it looks identical to Wüsthof boning knife because that was single edge. That was a single edge dagger. So all the boning knives we use nowadays were your everyday cutlery. That was your boning knife. It was for different type of boning reasons.
I got you.
And because what you're trying to do with the knife hasn't changed, just the application of the knife changed. So that knife that you had there was, if you had that knife 1,000 years ago, that will probably qualify as a personal carry or your individual dagger. But following the lines of that, so that will make a perfect boning knife with the shape and everything. But yeah, there was a hybrid between a boning knife and a single edge dagger.
That's cool. I like it. What I like about it is it makes sense. I mean, that's part of the reason I really like the Kyber knife. I think the Kyber knife would actually, they would at least be a nice slicer, or at least to have a knife that's influenced by that shape and to have maybe a similar style handle, I think would be a fucking cool slicer or brisket knife.
Hyper knife will make a really bad slicer. Do you know why?
Because of the T-spine. But I mean, so
This-
just like but taking inspiration from the blade profile,
Like,
like I really love the profile
yeah,
so much.
profile is awesome. Profile will make it perfect. Actually, I use something similar to hyper knife profile because if you want to carve something long, like you automatically drawn that because that shape works.
Yeah,
That shape works, man. Like, sometimes you come up with the new kitchen knife design, and as somebody who handled kitchen knives, you're thinking, yeah, cool story, bro, but it's not gonna work. Something like that, you see, that hasn't changed.
right,
It hasn't changed form over 1,000 years. Do you know why? Until we find a better material, that is the form to use. So
right.
if you look at back to knives, first knives, it was like, let's talk about the obsidian knives.
Oh,
So what
sure.
happened? Somebody made an obsidian knife that was about probably 3 inches long.
Right.
Then somebody saw it and said, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna make something bigger." They made an obsidian knife 4 inches long. Like, yeah, take that. Mine is bigger than yours. This race continued until till somebody made a 10-inch obsidian knife and broken in half. Then
Right.
they realized all the remaining obsidian knives out there are like certain size because the strength of the material we use doesn't support anything bigger. If you look at the
Right.
bronze, if you look at the bronze swords, we start making bronze swords like they right now look like a dagger, but it came to a point like 12-inch, 13-inch became a standard. What the material can handle, what the material was suitable for, and it got stuck. But now we're using
Right.
steel knives. If you look at the steel knives from knives made from steel 1,000 years ago, because the steel itself hasn't changed and what we use the knife for hasn't changed, then we found the perfect figure, perfect form. And that's why until somebody comes up with a new material and we're going to try to find a new way of using it, the
Right.
good shapes are the ones here to stay.
Sure. Yeah, and honestly, when I do a large slicer, like I did a one I took the blade show actually earlier this year, and it had, at least the blade had more of the shape of kind of like a kyber knife, and it did sweep up a little bit more than a kyber would. Uh, but kybers are always the inspiration for sure. I really love
Yeah,
them.
they're beautiful.
They're so good. We got a comment over here in the chat, and I got another question from the audience. Mike is actually saying he made a Yatagan brisket slicer, or I guess how does Yatan
Yatan, that's it.
Tan brisket slicer? That's awesome. Um,
Actually, Sabatier had the Yatan inspired slicers in their late 1960s. They had the Yatan slicer. It looks like Yatan tip, but instead of Yatan being like it's a recurve blade,
right?
you can tell
Yeah,
it's
they just
flat.
it's flat.
Yeah,
Oh, funny.
yeah, yeah. If you look at Sabatier catalogs and up to I think late 80s, they had a Yatan slicer. The tip is like Yatan swoops, but the underneath is flat because you
Oh
want to put
yeah,
it together.
yeah. I've seen that one. That is funny. I never even thought about that. All right, so we got a question here from Yerwin Nippenberg. He says, "What are your focus points for cutting geometry? Edge thickness at a certain height above the edge. How do you control the convexity in the bevel and near the edge?" So when you're designing your edge geometry, what kind of numbers are you shooting for at the cutting edge, and then say a centimeter or 2 centimeters above the cutting edge? How thick are you wanting it to be? Is it a convex grind? Are you doing S grinds? Are you doing flat grinds?
Somebody asked a similar question over to me in DMs, and I told him that I wasn't measuring, and he called me like, "You're not professional enough." So I'm gonna say the same thing.
That's hilarious.
Uh, I'm gonna give the same answer, man. It's really disappointing for a lot of people, but I finished the knife, then before putting handle, I cut things with
You
it.
cut with it. Honestly, I think that's actually a great answer, because that prioritizes the performance rather than kind of somewhat
Numbers.
random numbers. Yeah. You might be able to hit the numbers all day long. That doesn't mean it's going to cut great. And I
I,
honestly
I had, yeah.
go ahead.
I had friends who work off numbers and had the same thing. The same, like, man, I'm reaching the numbers, they're not working great, and like, I got some big knives, like they look like thick spine and thin behind the edge, and it's does it cut? So at the end of the knife, at the end of the day, when you buy a knife,
Yeah.
you're buying it to perform. The numbers, yeah, they say numbers don't lie, but instead of numbers, I'm looking at this. Does it like cutting feel? I don't know how to describe it. When I'm trying to cut through the food, am I exerting more pressure than I'm supposed to be, or all of a sudden am I hitting the cutting board?
Interesting.
There's
Yeah.
there's nothing that describes that cutting feeling. Like
Sure.
we went to the Good Food Show to promote the Sydney Knife Show, and old
Well,
ladies will come to the
that's a
table
smart
saying
move.
like, so, you guys are selling knife? Like, no, no, we're not selling knife. We're trying to get you to come to the show so I can sell you knife. Here's one of the knives I made just for you to get an understanding of the knife. Please use it. Like, you'll see a 7-year-old lady hold the knife, cut a potato, and the second like they meet the cutting board, and first thing they say like, fuck, because they never had something like that before, and that cutting feeling, that's I don't know how to describe that. If you
Yeah.
use a good knife, you know, like, oh shit, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I know
I've
exactly
seen
what that
people
feels like.
reach that with the numbers. I've seen people reach with the field. So I'm in the second group. I wish I could tell you the millimeters, man. Like if I knew it, I would have told you, but I don't.
Sure. Now,
And I'm not a
so
professional maker.
yeah, yeah, and I've definitely put numbers out there, but I'm the same way as you. I grind the knife and cut with it and base the grind or where I need to change and make improvements based on how it feels when it's performing rather than any numbers I'm hitting. Any numbers that I've shared are numbers that I've taken after I've gotten my grinding. So I do all my grinding, I get the blade to a place where it's performing nicely, and then I take numbers. But I'm never ever shooting for those numbers. If anything,
No.
if I'm shooting for a number anywhere, it might be at the edge. I might
Yeah.
I might measure the edge more than anything. But I won't really measure anything else because ultimately the rest of it, the numbers don't exactly matter versus the actual performance of the
Yeah.
blade. And
Like,
so
look, I'm sure there's proportions. I'm sure, Mareko,
sure,
if you take few of my blades, if you're somebody who's better with the numbers, they can say, hey, your proportions are this. Maybe there is. I just don't know. And again, I most of my grinds are simple. I do sometimes slight asymmetric. Excuse me.
hmm
I do convex. I don't do full flat unless I'm doing a small paring knife because if
sure,
you're cutting produce, anything longer than inch and a bit, you needed some change in the geometry because if it's
right,
flat, you initiate the cut and there's nowhere food to push.
yeah,
Or just start sticking. In a paring knife and a petty, that's not an issue. It's okay. Go
yeah,
full flat grind. But anything that has more height than the 1.5 inches, you need to do something about
yeah,
it. Do an S grind if you want. I don't do a lot of S grinds. The reason that is, especially with the Hunter Valley blades, I don't have time to do S grinds.
sure,
I was doing S grinds in Hunter Valley blades because I was using 1095. When I quenched the whole thing wasn't hard enough. So I had to do S grinds to thin my spine a little bit. That's the only time I've done S grinds.
I gotcha.
Or I've done some meat butchering knives. I've done S grind right behind the tip, so I can leave my tip thick. So like paying homage to those
Mhm.
single bevel daggers because the tips were really thick. It was a
Yeah,
diamond shaped tip
right,
because it's a meat processing knife. If I was to make the tip super thin like a chef knife, it's
yeah,
going to break. So versus what I've done was I was starting with the thin piece of damage steel to begin with. I left the tip as is, 2.8 mil, whatever. Then
yeah,
I done double hollow behind, so it's not
mm,
flexible, so it's stiff, and my
yeah,
tip is thick. That's the only time I was doing S grinds. But yeah,
yeah,
usually I go for simple convex.
yep. Like convex grind's great, honestly. I think
If you do it right,
sometimes because I feel like I'm partly to blame for for S grinds starting to become a thing. And it drives me crazy when people are either on one end saying S grinds are the only grind that you should have on a knife, and people that are like S grinds are bullshit. The reality is like it's not the end all be all. And really like it comes down to personal preference. Maybe somebody doesn't want the S grind, but you can get a great performing knife quite well, very easily without an S grind. Again, like a subtle convex or convex geometry is great. And I've cut with plenty of convex knives that cut like a dream that are not S
Yeah,
ground. And
yeah.
and again, it comes down to preference. Maybe somebody wants a blade to be lighter. If they want it lighter, then that's where the ability to do an S grind maybe comes in
Mhm.
to lighten up the blade. Or if they want the blade heavier, maybe you typically do S grinds, but instead of doing an S grind, you do a convex, you know?
Again, so a lot of the Japanese knives were ground S grind because yeah, they don't use belt grinders. They use
Yeah.
wheels.
Yeah.
And if you got the wheel, you're not having flat surface as much. And that's why they were doing it, not because it was the cool kids do. You know, sometimes I see S grinds and you can tell like it is S grind, but I bet that's not going to do it.
Mm. Yeah.
But versus you can tell like it's made for a purpose rather than if you're doing it to check the box, you're in the wrong spot. You know, just
Right.
whatever it cuts.
Right. And at that point, when it comes to that, there, yeah, I think some people are doing it to check the box and to have that kind of as a selling point in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're getting ready for the Cambria show. The Q&A was all about getting ready for shows and knife shows. Do you have any tips for
Perfect.
people?
Look, I've done bad in shows. I've done great in shows. Okay. Um, if you're asking for a knife makers going for the first time, knife shows actually a lot more work, but the work actually doesn't stop when you finish working in the shed. You're selling your story. You're selling your products. Oh shit, who's that fat? Oh shit, that's me. This
This
was
is
from Adelaide. This was
this
from
is
Adelaide.
Ellen.
Adelaide, yeah, it was fun.
Okay.
I got to hang out with the people. And the best thing about shows, all the knives are under the same light. There's no
Hmm.
Photoshop. If
Yep.
you got any blemishes on your knife, you get to see it. But also that's bad because then you got to make sure your fit and finish is spot on.
Yep.
Okay, there's no filters to hide it, and you're gonna have to be willing to talk to people. Look, I'm an introvert. I can do one knife show a month. That's my capacity. If I do two, I'm struggling
Hmm.
because when you talk to like a couple thousand people, like you're saying the same thing. Some people are not interested. Some people might say something stupid to infuriate you, or they might offend you. You just gotta turn around and keep doing the same thing, man. It's not easy. And a lot of the knife makers, we work by ourselves. We work in our sheds. We are solitary animals.
Yeah.
And for some, it's really hard to get into like that sales mode, sales pitch. It's hard. But what I recommend for people to do is if you're doing your knife show for the first time, don't do the mistake I did. I had 13 knives. I had 13 knives. I wish I had brought 8 knives that they were better than the 13 that I had. Okay, you don't have to have 50 knives. Make sure you have your best work out there. Okay, bring your best work and signage. A lot of
Hmm.
times I was just like taking the back of my business card with my shitty handwriting. I'll scribble something, and half the day I'm looking at it like, did I say 450? Did I say 750? Or is it 1250? Like I couldn't read my own handwriting. Like somebody wanted to buy a knife. It's like I'm buying it, and she brought 450. I'm like, no, that's 14 because my handwriting is so shitty. So make sure you have clear signage. Some
Hmm.
people will say, you know what, I don't have any signage. I just want to initiate the conversation. Perfect. If you got 6 knives, that's the perfect way to go. If you're outgoing, if you are extrovert, you don't mind talking to people, that's fine. But again, if somebody wants to do a knife show for the first time, I tell them to go to a knife show prior to exhibiting to see what the common etiquette is. See
Yep.
what the other people are doing.
Yep.
Do you see 40 other makers with the black shirt, with the beard, like ourselves, with the black tablecloth and knives plonked? Yeah, that's a selling point, man, because I'm sure out of the 40, having the same black shirt with the knives are cool, something forged, with the beard,
Yeah.
you have to now selling point comes. And sometimes somebody who's better at presenting themselves, their story, is going to sell a inferior knife compared to the guy right next to you. Might have a
Yep.
great knife, but they
Yeah.
might not want to be willing to engage in a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. prepare yourself to be ready to talk a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't sit. My biggest thing is don't sit. Stand up. You're going
Oh
to be
yeah,
tired.
especially if somebody is talking, it comes to your table. Always stand up to talk to them.
Because once I sit in the knife shows, I don't want to get up. So I don't want to get up, and I'm up, man. I'm up like till Sunday 3 o'clock. I'm up. So the second I sit down, I don't want to get up, and you don't engage. Like you need to be able to get in people.
Yeah, and well, and I think there's also some psychology around, or I don't know if there's actual psychology, but I personally, when I walk up to a table and somebody continues to sit down, it feels to me like they don't really care. They're not
Yeah,
very interested in having that versus standing up and be excited, not necessarily like jumping over the table, but like they're interested in you. They want to talk to you. And the more
eye
that a
contact.
person feels interest, like they're interesting or worth even the fucking energy to stand up out of your chair
Yeah,
to talk to you, it feels better. And again, it encourages that interaction with somebody. Yeah.
exactly. Canberra is a smaller show. It's only one day, but it'll be
Okay.
good.
Cool.
Any other
Man,
question you have?
I
Do you
don't
have another
think
question?
unless anybody watching the live stream right now, Mike or Greg, have a question, um, then let's see. I'll double check the Patreon. I think we got Mike and Yedowin's questions. I think that might be it. I do want to say thank you for taking the time. I know this is the beginning of your day when you normally would be working, so I
All good,
appreciate.
man. I have time. Like I'm not trying to cut it short, but I have time. I was
Yeah,
checking to
yeah,
see if you got any more questions.
yeah. No, I appreciate it.
You
No,
might have a
I
question as well.
should I have a question?
I don't know.
Do you have any questions for me?
I don't know, man. Like what it's a strange time to be as a knife maker, isn't it, Marco?
Yeah, yeah.
So what do you recommend? My question to you, what do you recommend to what mediums to use to market your work, or but what next? We had an Instagram ban not long ago where all
Yeah.
the knife makers were suffering. Like it, I think it was an eye opener. What do
Oh,
you
for
think
sure.
what do you think the marketing mediums is going to be for us?
I mean, I think honestly, as the internet and social media, where a lot of knife makers are spending their time and showing their work, becomes more and more busy and flooded, the clientele, the people who are potential customers and clients, are going to be overwhelmed by the number of choices. And so they're going to rely more on, I think at least, they're going to rely more on gallerists or somebody like Daniel O'Malley from Blade Gallery or Abe Shaw over at Eating Tools, to be kind of a guide to help walk them through the experience and try to,
Mhm.
and basically as gallerists, especially Abe does a really great job of telling the maker's story. And again, that's part of the whole sales thing that you were talking about, is telling your story and connecting with the potential customer in a
Yeah.
meaningful way. And I was talking about that also in my Q&A. But I think there's going to be a lot more reliance on that. I think just because there's just like such a massive selection, it's very overwhelming. So I think relying on purveyors, I think doing shows, honestly, is a way to differentiate yourself, because you get to meet these people firsthand. Figuring out what show to actually go to might be kind of more of the question for the future, because I was talking about Blade Show, and Blade Show is great. There are a lot of custom makers there, but the people that attend the show are a very small number of them. I feel like they're interested in seeing the custom work, but very few of them are actually interested in buying the work. They're there for the production stuff, which is great. There's a place for the production stuff out there too, but they're looking at like the production folders and other kind of knives that are sold there at that show
Mhm.
rather than the handmade. But I do think there's still value in in doing those shows. It's just being clear to yourself what you're hoping to get out of it. and not kind of disillusioning yourself to think that you're going to sell everything.
Yeah.
I think another way that makers, and I kind of talked about this over on Knife Talk the other day. Actually, during the we did the DCI show the other day, and so I think collaborating with other makers. So if Instagram or other platforms are limiting who can see your page, you know who is your the audience that you have, at least as far as I understand it on Instagram, the audience that you have, they can see your work just fine because they already follow you. But what's
Yeah.
happening is you're restricted, or you're being restricted. Your pages, or sorry, the pages are being restricted from being recommended to new people.
Yeah.
um like I'll scroll through my Instagram and I'll see all kinds of silly posts about cats, and like these are Instagram suggestions, and I these are posts that I share with my kid. My kid loves the cat posts and stuff like that, so I see tons of that stuff. So but what I'm not seeing are the knife makers. And so the way to try to, I think, especially if you're going to try to stay in Instagram and continue to grow your account or grow your awareness, is by collaborating with other makers and kind of trying to get some cross pollination. Now there's gonna, like, between you and me, there's probably a lot of people that follow you that follow me and vice versa.
Hmm.
But there's still an opportunity to connect with a few people there, and even if it's 10 people, that's 10 more knives,
Yeah.
right? And so that's an opportunity, by doing a collaboration with somebody, to have kind of that crossover between audiences. That could help. Honestly, trying to get into print, even though like in magazines or in newspapers, the makers like Fingal Ferguson and Florentine Kitchen Knives and Jeff Fader has been like they've been in news, or not newspapers, but I mean some of them have been in
Magazines. Yeah.
newspapers, but magazines. Yeah, magazines. And honestly, that really helps, because again, it's those magazines acting as kind of a guide in a way, and vouching for your quality. And so by having those kind of ways to advertise versus just through hoping for organic growth through Instagram, I think
Yeah. So
is
it's a
a way to,
different
I
word.
mean,
It's not like a word of mouth is gonna get you there. Like, yeah, those days are.
I don't think they're gone, but it's very slow, because you're
Yeah.
hoping maybe for, you know, everybody, say you have, I don't, what's your follower count at? I have no idea.
21,000 or something like that.
Okay, that's great. So your hope, yeah, 21,000. So for every person, hopefully each one of those people knows at least one person that they might be willing to share your content with, because you did a cool post or you made a cool knife. But that those kind of shares don't happen necessarily all the time. You get maybe 20 of those people. And so it's trying to also figure out how can you encourage kind of that grassroots growth through the content that you're creating. But at the same time, then are you a fucking knife maker, or are you a content creator? Because content creation requires a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
And yeah.
My hats off to the people who are like every day creating content. But again, me having two brands and having to make knives for that, like I'm thinking like, man, with all the stuff I have going on, it's I think at this point not feasible for me to create content and trying to create knives,
Mm-hmm.
and let alone keeping the social media. Like I haven't posted anything for last week because I didn't have anything because I was away for 5 weeks. I came back, finished few knives, and I'm looking like, and I got nothing to post.
Sure.
I had nothing to post for a while. I'm thinking like, shit, I need to work so I can just create something so I can, hey, this is what I made. This is what I'm working on.
Right.
And hats off to those people who are every day pumping out videos, man. Like I
Yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that because we still have our own personal audiences that we're able to get content to, trying to do, if you're really trying to get that Instagram growth, then trying to figure out how to connect with those audiences, even if it's not necessarily something you're making. Like maybe you talk about part of your process that's really enlightening to somebody, or show and like help dispel some of the mythology around different techniques or different construction styles and stuff like that. And then somebody's like, whoa, that's super interesting. I never thought of that before. And then they turn around and share that to even just 5 people. If each of those people have 1 or 2 or 5 people to share with, then that kind of growth can continue to happen. Now, it's not going to be at the same rate, I think, maybe as people used to be experiencing, but it's still something. And really, you don't need everybody to follow you. Honestly,
No.
like if every one of your 21,000 fucking followers bought a knife, emailed you tomorrow, like could you make 21,000 knives in even the next 20 years or 10 years of your life? That's a lot of fucking knives.
Yeah.
That'd be 2,000 knives a year, 2,000 plus for 10 years. That's just way too many. And so it's also trying to figure out, sure, we're being limited, but how many do you actually need? I would for most hand knife makers, you know, it's nice to have 100 people in the moment right now interested in your work. And then you continually are putting out posts and stuff. And as long as you have a kind of a consistent base of 100 or so people who want to buy your shit, you're going to be good. Honestly, you don't need thousands and thousands and thousands. You need 100 right now, and 100 next year, and 100 the year after that. And if you can do that, especially for like the high end stuff, you know, if you're doing for more of the production stuff, you need what, 200 a year, or 500 a year, right?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And as long as you can do that, then you're in a good spot. But I think it's chasing the difference between how many, like chasing really high follower count versus how many you actually need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And figuring that out, because I couldn't make $100,000 knives tomorrow. There's no fucking way. I couldn't make I don't even know if I could make another 1,000 knives before I fucking die. That's a lot of knives.
That's a lot of knives.
It's a lot of knives. I don't even know if I've made 200 knives at this point, and I've been making knives for 10 years.
10 years at least, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm a slow maker. I'm a slow goer.
Guys, buy more custom knives. Support the craftsmen.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, Mike's jumping in. He says he's good. He doesn't have any questions, but he's enjoying the conversation. I don't know. I'm gonna double check the Patreon one last time, but I think we're good on the Patreon questions. I want to remind everybody that if you want to jump in and be part of the conversations, then please get into the Patreon, join and be part of the conversation, because we want you here. And any questions you might have, you don't get to just, I get to talk to Mert whenever the fuck I want because he's my buddy, but not everybody has that luxury. And so I think this podcast and doing these chats through the Patreon are a very rare opportunity to be able to connect with very talented makers in a meaningful way and ask them questions that are really important to them or to you personally. So I want to thank you, Mert, again for taking the time, for coming in and chatting with me. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. And I want to thank all of the super sponsors for the Patreon again. That's Josh Weston, Josh A. Weston on Instagram, Michael Poor, who is Red Dragon Forge on Instagram, Russell Tinsley, who is Can't Make Knives, as well as Oozle Finch Beers on Instagram, Dan Hubbs, who's 66 Mountain Knives on Instagram and Facebook, Lawrence Lake, who is LGL Knives or Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Gabe Fletcher, who is Anchorage Forge, as well as Anchorage Brewing on Instagram, and Eric Kidwell, who is District 202 LLC on Instagram. Thank you all again for your time and your support and your patronage. It really means a lot, and it helps to have these conversations, and I'm very thankful for all the support. It really means a lot. I appreciate it. That's it. Bye, everybody. We'll see you.